Chapter 97. Hua Tianxiang walked beside Yili and shrugged. To be honest, I was shocked that she would stand up for you. Judging from her expression, it doesn't seem like she has other intentions towards you. Noble consort Lu's swordsmanship is very good. Yili decided not to tell Hua Tianxiang that she was despised by noble consort Lu. Hua Tianxiang sighed, her face full of envy and jealousy. Speaking of which, every year in the capital, there has been a selection of the most talented woman or the most beautiful woman. But noble consort Lu was definitely a real beauty and talent. It is said that the 100-flower feast that year was the most exciting year since the founding of the Dechu state. At that time, the two women who participated in the competition were Han Mingyue's top two beauties of the Chu capital. You can imagine the scene. Yili agreed. Even if she didn't see it, she could imagine the ferocity of the competition. In the end, noble consort Lu won. No, she lost. Hua Tianxiang said regretfully. At that time, noble consort Lu was only 13 years old, and Su Zuodi was already 16. Even if noble consort Lu is now a peerless beauty, she was only a beauty at 13 years old. So the top beauty of the Chu capital was Su Zuodi. The second beauty of noble consort Lu was painted by Han Mingyue when noble consort Lu was 15 years old. Of course, in terms of appearance, I have never seen a woman better than Su Zuodi in this world. Noble consort Lu lost without complaint. Yes. And then the two of them faced each other. That year's 100-flower feast basically had nothing to do with other people. Su Zuodi took first place in dance, painting, poetry, and zither. Noble consort Lu took first place in chess and calligraphy. Their opponent took second place. After Su Zuodi got engaged, she didn't participate in the 100-flower feast anymore. Noble consort Lu, on the other hand, took first place in dance, painting, poetry, zither, and so on. As long as there was a 100-flower feast, she took first place. Yili was completely convinced. No wonder noble consort Lu looked down on her. She was indeed very capable. Seeing that Yili didn't care, Hua Tianxiang said angrily, "Can't you work harder? Don't you have any sense of crisis?" Yili sighed, "You think too much." She and noble consort Lu were not on the same path, okay? If she really had to learn to be a peerless genius, she would rather play a month-long wilderness survival game. She had no problem drawing topographical maps or gun blueprints, but when it came to drawing, she was only good at drawing embroidery. She had already outperformed herself during the 100-flower festival. Forget it. Waving her hand, Hua Tianxiang glanced at Princess Ling Yun, who was staring at the two of them, and asked, "How did you provoke Princess Ling Yun this time?" Yili helplessly replied, "I'm sure this is the first time I've seen Princess Ling Yun. I've only seen the Crown Prince of Zhennan in Xiling before." Hua Tianxiang was puzzled. Why didn't she look like she wanted to eat you? Cloud-grasping sword. This was the only thing she could think of that had anything to do with Princess Ling Yun. Cloud-grasping sword. That belongs to the Ding Palace. What does it have to do with Princess Ling Yun? Everyone knows that it was sent back from the Western Tomb. Princess Ling Yun probably couldn't bear to part with it. Let's go somewhere else. Yili suggested as she stared at Princess Ling Yun, who was walking towards them. Hua Tianxiang curled her lips. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Don't tell me you want to run around the Imperial Garden. Ding Palace's consort. While they were talking, Princess Ling Yun had already arrived in front of them. The noble ladies who were not too far away also inadvertently glanced over. "Princess, is there anything else?" Princess Ling Yun said, "This princess wants to talk to the princess alone." Yili frowned and said, "I don't know what I need to talk to the princess about." Princess Ling Yun's beautiful face slightly sunk as she said, "This princess has traveled 1,000 miles to come here. Could it be that Ding Wangfei isn't even willing to compensate this princess for a walk in the Imperial Garden?" Yili helplessly nodded and said, "Since it's like this, princess, please. Princess Lingyun gave a soft snort and raised her head as she walked forward. Yili gave a comforting look to the worried Hua Tianxiang and followed with a sigh. Young people nowadays really need to be taught a lesson. Princess Lingyun dismissed her maid, and Yili was naturally embarrassed to let Qing Wan and the others follow. The two walked side by side along the path of the imperial garden. Yili asked, "Princess, is there anything you want to say to me?" Princess Lingyun turned her head to look at her and snorted, "You are not worthy of Prince Ding." Yili smiled, "Princess, you flatter me. Marrying a daughter to a high position, doesn't this mean that I have joined a good family and found a good husband?" Lingyun said disdainfully, "You don't have to pretend like this princess has already investigated you." An unknown young lady of the minister's mansion, and a woman whose engagement was broken off by Li Wang. She was betrothed to Prince Ding by the emperor, so she has some reputation in the Chu capital. Even if you got the title of the most talented woman in the capital, so what? You are still not worthy of Prince Ding. Oh, is that so? Yili's expression did not change, and she asked lightly, "Even if I am not worthy of Prince Ding, what does it have to do with you, princess?" Princess Lingyun raised her eyebrows, and said with a slightly proud smile, "You will soon know what this princess and this princess have to do with each other." Prince Ding is this princess's, Yili, if you know what's good for you, then obediently scram. Yili frowned, and stared seriously at Princess Lingyun in front of her for a long time, before asking, "Princess, I have a question to ask." "Speak." "May I ask, does Xiao Yao know who you are?" Yili asked, "According to what I know, Xiao Yao has not left home for at least 7 years, then the most conservative estimate is that even if you met each other, it would be when the princess was 7 or 8 years old. May I ask, do you think Xiao Yao remembers who you are? Or, does he not know you at all? So what? I am the most honorable princess of Deling, could it be that I cannot compare to you?" Princess Lingyun glared at her angrily. Yili looked at her strangely. If the princess really wanted to marry Prince Ding, shouldn't she have appeared before our wedding to fight with me? Now that we are already married, why did the princess only appear? You have to know that the Prince Ding mansion has never had a case of marrying 2 consorts at the same time, or divorcing a wife and remarrying again. Or would the princess rather be a concubine? If not, even if I die, and the princess successfully marries into the Prince Ding mansion, she will only be a stepwife, and will still have to come to my coffin to kowtow and burn incense on the 1st and 15th of every month. You wish. This princess will definitely become Prince Ding's official consort. Princess Lingyun said angrily. You can think whatever you want. Yili looked at her pitifully. However, I feel that heir apparent Genom of Gojoseon's intentions seem to be different from yours, don't you think so? A trace of hatred flashed through Princess Lingyun's eyes. If Lei Tengfeng hadn't put her under house arrest in the embassy the moment they arrived in the Chu capital, and announced to the public that she was not in good health, and only released her after Prince Ding's wedding. Why did she only come to find Yili now? Yili smiled as she looked at Princess Lingyun, whose expression kept changing, and continued, "Speaking of which, there aren't many who bring a young princess on a diplomatic mission to a neighboring country. Usually, it's for political marriage. I heard that Xi Ling suffered a snowstorm last winter, could it be?" There were many things that she just didn't want to think about, but it wasn't that she couldn't understand. She wasn't worried about this Princess Lingyun at all. No matter how capable she was, the emperor would definitely not let Mo Xiaoyao marry a Xi Ling princess to make things difficult for him. Not to mention the Xi Ling princess, even the princess of the northern tribes and the princess of the southern Zhao had nothing to do with Mo Xiaoyao. Only the little princess in front of her couldn't see the situation clearly, and thought that she could get what she wanted if she directly came to her and asked her to back down. She really didn't want to look down on the intelligence of these princesses, but, were there any normal princesses among the younger generation? Or were they really too young? Chapter 98. What exactly do you like about Prince Ding? Yili asked curiously as she looked at the determined Princess Lingyun in front of her. Princess Lingyun gave a soft snort and said, "What do you know?" Prince Ding is the most outstanding man in the world, the youngest and most powerful general, as well as the most talented man in the world. This princess wants to marry the most outstanding man in the world. He doesn't seem to be as outstanding as you say. Yi Li reminded her. You're really unbearably unscrupulous. Talking to you makes this princess feel extremely disgusted. Prince Ding must be blind to fall in love with a woman like you. I know that it was the Eastern Chu Emperor who gave the order for him to marry you. How could a woman like you understand just how outstanding he is? Looking at the righteous woman in front of her, Yi Li reflected on whether or not she should be ashamed. Compared to this princess in front of her, Yang Qianru was so normal and Yi Ying was so cute. I will definitely become Princess Ding. Princess Lingyun stared at her and said resolutely. Work hard, I wish you success. Yi Li lightly said. I will definitely become Princess Ding. Princess Lingyun said through gritted teeth. Then she jumped into the man-made lake by the side of the road. Save me, the princess has fallen into the water. A sharp female voice rang out in the royal garden. Yi Li cursed and also jumped into the water. Bastard, there really are a lot of crazy people these days. Mo Xiaoyao, you better prepare to die. The moment she fell into the water, Yi Li couldn't help but want to curse. Even though she had persisted in training her skills and body these past few years, compared to her previous life where she had to go through wind and rain and roll in the mud, there was still a gap. Moreover, even if this body wasn't favored, it was still a pampered girl from a wealthy family. When she entered the water, she couldn't help but have a slight spasm. Fortunately, Yi Li was already mentally prepared. She quickly adjusted herself and headed towards Princess Lingyun. She successfully grabbed the struggling Princess Lingyun and dragged her towards the bottom of the water. With a single glance, she could tell that this Princess Lingyun didn't know how to swim. Yi Li couldn't help but sneer. Very good. Should she praise this princess for having the courage to sacrifice herself for love? Daring to jump into the water without knowing how to swim. Then let her experience what it feels like to drown. She believes that in the future she will know what it means to do. Originally, Princess Lingyun didn't panic. She knew that someone would come to save her. But soon, she realized that she was quickly sinking to the bottom of the water. She couldn't help but panic and struggle even more fiercely. Yi Li snorted in her heart. She clearly felt the movement in the water and knew that someone had entered the water. Yi Li quickly went behind Princess Lingyun and knocked her out. Then, she dragged her to the other side. When she estimated that Princess Lingyun was about to reach her limit, she pushed her back. It seemed that in an instant, everyone in the Imperial Garden had gathered by the lake. The Shilin Kingdom guards and the Imperial Garden guards who arrived first had already entered the water to save her. She's there. The people by the lake suddenly shouted. Everyone quickly looked over and saw a colorful brocade emerging from the water. Then, they saw that Princess Ding had also emerged. One of her hands was supporting Princess Lingyun. In everyone's eyes, it was clearly Princess Ding who had saved Princess Lingyun. Yi Li looked at the guards who had discovered their figures and quickly swam over. She smiled at Princess Lingyun, who was still unconscious. Princess, wake up. Princess, someone has come to save us. Originally, Yi Li didn't use too much strength to save Princess Lingyun, who was dragged out of the water, quickly opened her eyes. However, she realized that Yi Li was smiling mockingly at her. Ignoring their current situation, Princess Lingyun screamed, "Let go of I." Then, she struggled with all her might. Princess, don't move. Be careful. I don't need you to care about me. Seeing that the guards were already in front of her, Princess Lingyun fearlessly pushed Yi Li away. Very good. Yi Li looked terrified as she followed the direction that Princess Lingyun had pushed her away and sank back into the water. When Princess Lingyun came out of the water, the palace maids waiting on the shore immediately put on dry clothes for her. Qing Yu and Qing Xia angrily glared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, our princess was kind enough to save you. Why did you push her? Princess Lingyun raised her head. As expected, she saw that many people were looking at her with condemning eyes. She couldn't help but be surprised. This was different from what she had originally planned. I didn't push her. Hua Tianxiang coldly smiled and said, a princess dares to do something but doesn't dare to admit it. Even if you want to lie, you should make up a lie that can fool people. Or does the princess think that everyone here is blind? Princess Lingyun angrily said, she pushed this princess down. This princess doesn't need her to save me. The Sunshine eldest princess said with a heavy expression, princess means that Princess Ding pushed you into the water and then jumped in herself to save you? In the end, you are safe and sound. She still hasn't come up. Princess better pray that Princess Ding is fine. Otherwise, even if you are the Xiling princess, my Dechu state won't let this go. Princess, we found the princess. Qing Yu anxiously called out from the shore. In the lake, Qing Shuang and Qing Wan each supported the clearly unconscious Yi Li to the surface. The people on the shore quickly helped pull her up and put on dry clothes for Yi Li. Qing Yu held her hand and took her pulse. Zhaoyang princess anxiously looked at Yi Li and said, how is it? Why hasn't the imperial physician come yet? Qing Yu raised her head and said, many thanks for the princess' concern. The princess drank a few mouthfuls of water and fainted. There shouldn't be anything serious. However, the princess needs a place to rest. Zhaoyang princess looked around and said decisively, this place is the closest to Morning Glow Hall. Send Princess Ding there. Everyone crowded around the unconscious Yi Li and led by Zhaoyang princess to Morning Glow Hall. Princess Lingyun, who had also fallen into the water but was safe and sound, was naturally unintentionally ignored by everyone. Looking at the crowd hurriedly leaving, Princess Lingyun's face alternated between green and white. Princess. The palace maid of the Xiling kingdom following her carefully called out. Get out. Princess Lingyun said angrily. The atmosphere in Morning Glow Hall was heavy. In the inner hall, Mo Xiuyao sat by the bed with a grave expression and looked at the unconscious woman on the bed. The imperial physician carefully went forward to take her pulse. The eldest princess sat at the side and asked with a frown, how is Princess Ding? The imperial physician thought for a moment and glanced at Mo Xiuyao before replying, Your Highness, Princess, the princess consort is fine. It's just, she was frightened. This subject will prescribe some calming medicine and medicine to expel the cold. The eldest princess said, since she's fine, why hasn't the princess woken up yet? The imperial physician said, the princess is a woman. She probably choked on water in a hurry and fainted. But it's not serious. She'll wake up after resting for a while. The eldest princess couldn't help but think of how Yi Li had carried Princess Lingyun to the surface of the water and had been suddenly pushed by Princess Lingyun. Her expression became even heavier. She nodded and said, go and boil the medicine. Chapter 99. Chen bids farewell. There was only Zhaoyang princess and Mo Xiuyao left in the room. Zhaoyang princess stood and said, Xiuyao, take good care of Wang Fei. I will seek justice for Princess Lingyun for Princess Ding. Mo Xiuyao nodded faintly, thank you for your trouble, but this matter should be settled after Princess Li wakes up. Zhaoyang princess sighed and nodded, as you wish. Stay with your Wang Fei. I will leave first. Seeing the eldest princess leave, Mo Xiuyao moved his wheelchair forward. He stared at the sleeping woman on the bed for a beat before asking slowly, Princess Li, do you plan on sleeping through tonight's palace banquet? Yi Li's eyelashes trembled slightly and she slowly opened her eyes. How did you know? Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said faintly, intuition. Even the grand physician was fooled, how could I know? Thinking back to how the grand physician was puzzled and confused, and could only say in the end that she was unconscious due to shock, Mo Xiuyao had a faint smile in his eyes. Princess Li, I never knew that you liked saving people from dangers so much. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said faintly. Yi Li said helplessly, I didn't have a choice. If I didn't save her, it would have been me who pushed her into the water. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes flashed. Just now, outside, Princess Lingyun did insist that you pushed her into the water. Outside, she was really stubborn. She could still make a fuss after that. Yi Li exclaimed. Under the water, she had really made a fuss with Princess Lingyun. She didn't think that she would make a fuss when she didn't want to see the grand physician. Thinking about the main culprit of her misfortune, Yi Li's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She stared at Mo Xiaoyao's half-exposed handsome face and said, speaking of Prince, today's matter is also because of you. Do you have anything to say? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and looked at her questioningly. Yi Li snorted and said, that Princess Lingyun is infatuated with Prince. She even vowed that she would become the Ding King's princess. Shi Ling's Princess Lingyun. Mo Xiaoyao frowned. Yi Li stared at him with a dangerous look in her eyes. Don't tell me you really have some kind of promise with this princess? Yi Li asked. How could he kidnap a 7 or 8-year-old girl? Such a bastard, she must beat him to death. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and looked at Yi Li seriously. I can confirm that Princess Lingyun and I have never met before. If you haven't met before, why would she cry and make a fuss about marrying you? She even jumped into the lake herself. Could it be, because of the Ding King's position? Yi Li didn't understand. She didn't suspect that Mo Xiaoyao would lie to her on this matter. In fact, the probability of Mo Xiaoyao and Princess Lingyun knowing each other wasn't high. Logically speaking, marrying into the Ding King's residence doesn't seem to be in the interest of a Shi Ling princess. If Shi Ling wants a marriage alliance, the best choice is to marry Princess Lingyun to the emperor. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at her and seemed to be surprised. How do you know that Shi Ling wants a marriage alliance? Otherwise, why would they bring a princess over from so far away? To visit? Mo Xiaoyao said, Shi Ling and our Dechu state have always been at odds. Even if these few years are considered peaceful, everyone knows that sooner or later, they will fight. Normally, Shi Ling wouldn't really let a princess come to Dechu state for a political marriage alliance. In this kind of situation, a political marriage alliance was equivalent to a hostage. Once the two countries fought, no matter if you were a princess or a commandery princess, you could only be a pitiful sacrifice. Yi Li frowned. What he said was true. In this kind of situation where both sides knew what was going on, even if the emperor of Shi Ling had no place to put his daughters, there was no need to send them to his enemy. Mo Xiaoyao watched as she leaned against the headboard and frowned, deep in thought. His eyes warmed. Don't think too much. Whether they want a marriage alliance or not, we will know at the palace banquet tonight. When Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao walked out, the people who were whispering in the hall immediately fell silent. Clearly, the incident in the imperial garden had alarmed many people. Not only the empress, but even the emperor had come. Other than the northern tribes, envoys from other countries also came. Seeing the two of them come out, Mo Xiaoyao's gaze first fell on Yi Li. After a moment, he asked, Prince Ding, how is Princess Ding? Mo Xiaoyao calmly said, Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. Princess Li is fine. The Empress nodded in relief. It's good that Princess Ding is fine. Princess Ding, please sit. The two of them thanked the Empress and Yi Li sat down. Opposite them, the Crown Prince of Shiling Genom of Gojoseon, Lei Tengfeng, stood up and said in a clear voice, Princess Ding, Ling Yun was frightened just now and accidentally frightened the princess consort. Please forgive her. Before he finished speaking, Princess Ling Yun, who was beside him, stood up in pain and shouted, Royal brother, I already said that she pushed me down. Princess Xiaoyang frowned and looked at Princess Ling Yun. Princess, everyone here saw that Princess Ding wanted to save you. Instead, you pushed the exhausted Princess Ding into the water, causing her to faint. Princess Ling Yun was so angry that her face turned red. I have a witness. Princess Xiaoyang frowned and said faintly, I know. Princess just said that your maid saw Princess Ding push you into the water with her own eyes. But, to save your performance in front of Ding Wangfei in Feng de Palace and the situation in the water, it would be hard for people to believe your maid's words. Princess Ling Yun shrieked, "You are saying that this princess is lying." Princess Xiaoyang looked at her calmly. Even though she did not answer, her expression was enough to say. "Ling Yun, don't make trouble." Lei Tengfeng scolded in a deep voice. Princess Ling Yun was so angry that she started crying. She said hatefully, "Fine. If you don't believe this princess, then this princess will use my death to prove it." Finishing, she pulled out a golden hairpin from her head and was about to stab it into her heart. "Princess, you can't." Ling Yun. Lei Tengfeng quickly grabbed Princess Ling Yun's arm and snatched the hairpin away. He looked at this willful cousin of his with a headache. At the same time, he looked at Yili with some suspicion. Even though this cousin of his loved to make trouble, she had never had such an intense reaction before. Could it be that he had really wronged her? "Princess Ding, can you tell me what happened at that time?" Lei Tengfeng stared into Yili's eyes and asked. Yili calmly looked at him and softly said, "I also don't know what happened. Princess Ling Yun was talking to me when she suddenly fell into the lake. Then I fell down as well." Lei Tengfeng's brows furrowed even tighter. He looked at Yili with some vigilance and said, "You also fell in? Then do you know how you fell in?" Yili shook her head. Princess Ling Yun suddenly fell down. I was shocked, and before I could react, I had already fallen into the lake. Princess Ding seems to know how to swim. Lei Tengfeng said. Yili smiled and said, "Not really. It's just that I drowned when I was young, so I learned a bit. It's just that I don't have any experience, so." Chapter 100. Yili didn't seem to have said anything, but in the ears of everyone present, she had said everything. They even smoothly outlined the entire situation in their minds. Everyone had seen with their own eyes that it was Princess Ling Yun who had forcefully pulled Princess Ding to talk to her. The two must have been talking about something unpleasant, and Princess Ling Yun had accidentally fallen into the lake in her excitement, bringing Princess Ding down with her. If that was all, it would be fine to treat it as an accident. However, Princess Ding had clearly saved Princess Ling Yun. Who would have thought that Princess Ling Yun would repay kindness with enmity and push Princess Ding into the water, causing Princess Ding to faint? Furthermore, while the victim was unconscious, she claimed that the other party had pushed her into the water. Instantly, everyone in the hall looked at Princess Ling Yun and the envoy of West Hill differently. The nobles of Dechu State already didn't have a good impression of the people of West Hill. Now, they were even more displeased. What kind of conduct did the people of West Hill have? Actually, Princess Ling Yun doesn't have to seek death like this. After all, this is the palace of Dechu State. If something happens to the princess of West Hill, wouldn't it hurt the friendship between West Hill and Dechu State? Although I am a woman, I definitely won't do something that will harm the peace between the two countries. Yili looked at Princess Ling Yun and said calmly, "But I am a little confused. Princess Ling Yun and I came from the Imperial Garden. We both left our maids behind. Logically speaking, in that position, no matter if the princess fell or I pushed her down, your maids wouldn't be able to see it unless they were standing by the lake. How did they see me push the princess down with their own eyes? Your Majesty, could you please summon my maid and Princess Ling Yun's maids in?" The emperor glanced at Mo Jingqi. Seeing that he didn't object, he nodded and said, "We'll do as you say." Qing Wan and the others soon came in, along with the maids that Princess Ling Yun brought from the West Hill. In the end, it was Xiaoyang Princess who asked, "Were you with the princess and the princess at that time?" Qing Yu took a step forward and said, reporting to the princess, "At that time, Princess Ling Yun said that she wanted to speak with our princess consort alone and took the initiative to dismiss her own palace maids. Thus, Princess Consort ordered us servants not to follow." The Sunshine eldest princess raised her eyebrows and continued to ask, "Then, did you see what happened by the lake?" Qin Yu shook her head and said, "There is a rockery between the lakeside and the Imperial Garden. We were a little further away and were blocked by the rockery, so we didn't see what happened." Princess Lingyun's maid stepped forward and said, "We saw it. It was Princess Ding who pushed our princess down." Zhaoyang Princess said, "I also know about the rockery by the lake. I used to play in it when I was young. If you were standing behind the rockery, you definitely wouldn't have seen what happened by the lake." "We weren't behind the rockery," the maid blurted out. Zhaoyang Princess raised her eyebrows and looked at Princess Lingyun with a faint smile, asking, "Oh, then where were you at that time?" We were by the peach forest by the lake." The maid seemed to feel that she had said something wrong. She glanced at the West Hill in a panic and reluctantly answered. Zhaoyang Princess nodded, "If you were there, you could have seen it. But I want to know, why did you, who should have been waiting behind, walk around almost half of the Imperial Garden and appear by the peach forest? I remember that there is a small river between the peach forest and the rockery by the lake. The bridge seems to be a bit far." This. In front of so many people and the Emperor and Empress of Dechu State, the maid didn't dare to not answer the eldest princess. She could only say, "Yes. Princess wants us to go there, go there." Zhaoyang Princess smiled and said, "Go there for what? If it was in March, it would make sense to pick a few peach blossoms. But it's almost June now. Normal people wouldn't go there." We. The maid wanted to ask Princess Lingyun for help in a panic. However, at this time, Princess Lingyun couldn't think of any reason to justify herself. She could only argue, no matter how I's maid got there, at least it proves that they saw I being pushed into the lake. The eldest princess was born in the palace and wasn't easy to fool. Her phoenix eyes stared at the maid and said, "Since you said that Princess Ding pushed Princess Lingyun, then how did Princess Ding push her? At the time, was Princess Lingyun facing Princess Ding from the front, back, or side? Did Princess Ding use her left hand or right hand to push her? Did Princess Lingyun call out when Princess Ding pushed her into the water? If she did, what did she call out?" The maid's face froze. After a while, she said, "We remember. The princess back was facing Princess Ding. Princess Ding. Princess Ding used her left and right hand to push the princess. After the princess was pushed in, she was still screaming for help." On the side, Lei Tengfeng's face sunk. He cursed in his heart for being an idiot. The eldest princess expression changed and she said in a stern voice, "Impudent. You dare to lie in front of the Emperor and Empress." The guards that were patrolling the lake said that they didn't hear any cries for help. They only rushed over because they heard your cries. When they saw the ripples on the water, they knew someone had fallen into the water. Why did you hear Princess Lingyun's cries for help? Or is it because your martial arts are better than the guards in the palace? I. The maid forced herself to make up a long string of answers. She was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Being scolded by the eldest princess, her body turned soft and she immediately fell to the ground. "Princess, have mercy, this servant is..." "Shut up." Lei Tengfeng suddenly said, "You clearly didn't hear Ling Yun's cries for help. If the eldest princess asks, just answer honestly. Don't add oil to the fire and say things that aren't true." The maid was stunned. She quickly nodded and said, Yes. This servant knows her mistake. This servant didn't hear the princess cries for help." Lei Tengfeng turned around and smiled at Yi Li as he cupped his fists and said, "Wang Fei, please forgive her. This girl has been with Ling Yun since she was young and hasn't seen much. She was nervous and must have misjudged Wang Fei. Ling Yun has always trusted this girl. Today, she was frightened and misled by her. Wang Fei, please forgive her." Yi Li looked at Ling Yun's expression that refused to admit her mistake. She smiled coldly. "Shizi's words are too serious. It's not a big deal. It's just, this is the first time this consort attends a palace banquet, and this kind of mistake has really shamed the Ding palace. Maybe. Princess Lingyun's words are reasonable. Princess, don't you think so? Princess Lingyun snorted and turned her head away from Yili. Princess Ronghua, who was sitting beside Princess Xiaoyang, suddenly raised her eyebrows and smiled, asking, what did Princess Lingyun say to make Princess Ding agree? Yili faintly sighed and said, this consort is so rude that she has lost the face of the Ding palace and the prince. Maybe tomorrow Prince will give this consort a letter of divorce. This Princess Ding will probably be replaced. The Empress softly scolded, nonsense, this is just an accident. How can Prince Ding be so unreasonable? Chapter 101. Mo Xiaoyao, who had been sitting idly and watching the show, nodded with a solemn expression, what the Empress said is right. He tilted his head and smiled at Yi Li, rest assured Princess Li, no matter what happens, you will always be my Ding royal household's legitimate Di Fei. Whoever dares to question Princess Li is questioning my Ding royal household. Xiaoyang Princess also smiled, Xiaoyao's words are right. Whoever dares to question Princess Ding is going against Princess Ding, you just need to be at ease. Everyone knows that you have been wrong today. Prince, Wang Fei, Imperial sister is insensible and has misunderstood Wang Fei. This humble one will apologize on her behalf. Please forgive her, Wang Fei. Yi Li lowered her eyes and did not speak. She had a respectful expression as if she was waiting for the prince to make the decision. Mo Xiaoyao faintly said, things like apologizing should be done by the person involved to show more sincerity. Don't you think so? Lei Tengfeng was stunned. Mo Xiaoyao wanting Ling Yun to apologize personally was completely slapping Ling Yun's face. He was not willing to leave her any face. Looking thoughtfully at Yi Li, Lei Tengfeng said, Ling Yun is still young. As her elder brother, I have not taught her well. I should apologize personally. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and the corners of his lips slightly lifted, perhaps should teach the princess what it means to be responsible for one's own actions and how to be responsible for one's own actions. Today's matter, can I see it as Shi Ling's provocation towards my Ding royal household? Princess Lingyun was reprimanded by the person she had admired for a long time. Her eyes had long turned red from being wronged. Lei Tengfeng's heart jumped. If he knew that Mo Xiaoyao's attitude would be so unyielding, he would have directly dragged Princess Lingyun to apologize from the start. Losing face was better than losing his life. Ling Yun would definitely stay in East Chu. If she offended Mo Xiaoyao, he could still protect her while she was in East Chu. If he left, she wouldn't even know how she died. Today's matter, Lei Tengfeng believed that it was Ling Yun who wanted to target Ding Wang Fei. But if it was said that this Ding Wang Fei was innocent, Lei Tengfeng would never believe it. What was worse was that Mo Xiaoyao directly raised the issue of Shiling Kingdom's attitude towards King Ding's residence. Although Mo Xiaoyao was currently crippled, the Ding King's residence's power and the Black Cloud cavalry that could cause the entire world to tremble were still around. It would be fine if Mo Xiaoyao was a bit weaker, but Mo Xiaoyao's unyielding attitude made him even more fearful. Shiling Nation did not need war at the moment. Ling Yun apologized to Princess Ding. Almost immediately, Lei Tengfeng made a prompt decision to Princess Ling Yun. What? You want me to apologize to her? Princess Ling Yun screamed. Everyone present could not help but frown. Even Princess Ronghua disdainfully curled her lips. Even if she was known as the most arrogant princess in the capital, she would absolutely disdain to be so rude in this kind of situation. The upbringing of Shiling Kingdom's princess really made people have a whole new level of respect for her. Princess Lingyun bitterly glared at Yi Li and said, why should this princess apologize to her? I am the most honorable princess of Shiling. Can she accept this princess apology? Yi Li frowned. Princess is not willing to apologize because you look down on this consort. What do you have that makes this princess look down on you? Princess Lingyun arrogantly raised her chin and squinted at Yi Li. These days, she had already inquired about Yi Li. She was the daughter of the minister's mansion who had been neglected for many years. She was also the famous daughter of the third generation in the capital. She had no talent, no virtue, and no appearance. Even Prince Li could not bear her reputation and abandoned her. She was just lucky that the emperor appointed her to Prince Ding. As for the matter of being the champion of the 100-Flower Festival, in Princess Lingyun's eyes, it was not worth the slightest attention. Yi Li was just lucky. Yi Li's eyes flashed with a trace of cold light. She kept comforting herself in her heart, she is still young, I don't need to lower myself to her level. Damn it, she is still young. This girl needs to be taught a lesson. If she was still in the army, she would have already been peeled off a layer of skin. Then, is Princess looking down on Ben Fei or looking down on the status of Ding Wangfei? Yi Li asked. You are not worthy of Princess Ding's status at all. Princess Lingyun shouted. Yi Li pursed her lips and looked at Princess Lingyun with a smile. Everyone present couldn't help but praise her good temper and self-restraint in their hearts. Then, who does Princess think is worthy of the status of Princess Ding? If you have the nerve to say that you are this lady, then this princess will submit to you. Princess Lingyun choked and quickly looked at Mo Xiaoyao. It was a pity that the falling flowers intended to fall but the flowing water did not. Mo Xiaoyao only had a faint smile as he looked at the Wang Fei beside him. He did not detect Princess Lingyun's resentful gaze at all. Even if Princess Lingyun could announce her intentions for Princess Ding's position in front of Yi Li, she did not have the face to say that only she was worthy of Prince Ding in front of so many people. It was Yi Li who clicked her tongue in wonder at her resentful expression. This girl had never seen Mo Xiaoyao before, but the first time she saw him, she could show such deep affection. If it was 8 years ago, Mo Xiaoyao could say that it was love at first sight, but the current Mo Xiaoyao lacked the conditions to make people fall in love at first sight. Could hero worship really make a young girl this infatuated? Even if it was like this, shouldn't she worship the heroes of her own country? Or was this princess a person without borders? If it was in the past, it wouldn't matter if princess looked down on me. But now, this Fei cannot let the Ding Palace's ancestors be shamed because of this Fei. Yi Li stared at Princess Lingyun as she spoke. Princess Lingyun arrogantly said, this princess will definitely apologize to a person who is not as good as this princess. Yi Li raised an eyebrow. Previously the princess invited this Fei to a duel, but this Fei declined. Why don't we duel again? If this Fei loses, today's matter. It will be this Fei pushing down the official and will be dealt with by the princess. If the princess loses. Impossible. Princess Lingyun said, this princess will definitely not lose to you. Yi Li ignored her and continued, I want the princess to kneel and apologize in front of all the officials and women at the palace banquet. You. Alright, this princess agrees. Before Lei Tengfen could stop her, Lingyun had already raised her voice, if you lose, this princess wants you to bow 3 times and kowtow 9 times from the palace entrance to the most bustling place in the capital and then admit to everyone that you are not worthy to be Princess Ding. Yi Li indifferently nodded her head, it's a promise. Wait. Zhaoyang princess stood up and said, I remember that Princess Ding does not know how to use the sword. Yi Li smiled and said, Princess is right, so we will not duel with the sword, we will duel with the arrow. I believe that Princess Lingyun will also know how to do it, right? Ha! You want to duel with this princess in archery? Princess Lingyun acted as if she heard a joke as she looked at Yi Li with disdain and laughed out loud. This princess learned archery at the age of 7 and could shoot without missing at the age of 10. You. Can you even draw the bow? Yi Li lowered her brows and smiled faintly. Does the princess mean that we will not compete? This princess is afraid that you will lose too badly. Since you overestimate yourself, this princess will fulfill your wish. Tell me, how do you want to compete? Yi Li smiled in satisfaction and stood up to say to Mo Jingqi and the empress, then I will have to trouble the emperor and the empress to be witnesses. Mo Jingqi looked at her and asked, Princess Ding, have you made up your mind? You must consider it carefully. Yi Li smiled. Please, your majesty, grant my wish. The dignity of the Ding Palace cannot be trampled on. Chapter 102. Mo Jingqi's expression changed. He stared at Yi Li for a long time before he said in a low voice, Okay, I approve. Yi Li respectfully bowed. Yi Li thanks your majesty for granting my wish. Then she turned to Princess Lingyun and smiled. Princess, please. Humph. Princess Lingyun turned and walked out of the hall. Yi Li's smile was calm and gentle. She walked forward slowly. Lei Tengfeng, who was following behind, looked at the woman's straight and firm back. For some reason, he had a bad feeling in his heart. An open space in the imperial garden was crowded with people. Even in the distance, there were many idle palace maids and eunuchs peeking at the rare lively scene in the palace. Mo Jingqi and the empress brought the palace concubines, as well as the officials and noble ladies who came to the palace banquet to be witnesses for Princess Ding and Princess Lingyun. The imperial garden was unprecedentedly noisy. There were too many people. Except for the emperor, the empress, the concubines, and a few prominent members of the royal family, the others could only stand and watch. But obviously, no one cared about this small matter. Everyone was excitedly staring at the two people in the open space. Princess Ding didn't ask for a target. How would she compete? Noble consort Lu sat beside the emperor with a cold face. Her cold eyes swept over Yi Li with a hint of inquiry. Mo Jingqi lowered his head to look at his beloved consort's expression. He chuckled softly. What are you looking at? It seems that you like Princess Ding very much. Noble consort Lu frowned and said coldly, Your Majesty must be joking. I was just a little curious. Mo Jingqi smiled meaningfully. There are not many people who can make you curious. But in my opinion, Princess Ding has no chance of winning. Noble consort Lu raised her eyebrows. She still looked as cold as ice. Mo Jingqi's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness and darkness. He continued, Princess Lingyun is the beloved daughter of the Emperor Shiling. Since young, she has been practicing both civil and martial arts. In the West Hill, her archery is more famous than her swordsmanship. What's in it for His Majesty if she loses? Noble consort Lu said lightly. Mo Jingqi smiled but did not speak. He turned his gaze to Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting quietly not far away. His eyes darkened. Prince. Beside Mo Xiaoyao, Qing Shuang looked anxiously at Yi Li, who was preparing for the match. After following her mistress for so many years, how could Frost not know that her mistress had never learned archery? At most, she could only play with the third master when she went to the Su family. How could it compare to the archery that Princess Lingyun had been practicing since she was a child? Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, Don't be impatient. Lei Tengfeng frowned as he looked at Mo Xiaoyao's calm expression. Could it be that Princess Ding really had some sort of trump card? But no matter if she won or lost, there was no benefit to the West Hill. Lei Tengfeng could not help but curse in his heart. Was his imperial uncle muddle-headed? Why did he choose Lingyun to come to Dongchu? Even the emperor of Shiling's least favored princess was 100 times more sensible than this girl. Prince Ding, this is all because of Lingyun's ignorance. I heard that Princess Ding is the most talented woman in the capital, but she's not good at martial arts. Isn't this competition a little unfair to the princess consort? Mo Xiaoyao smiled lightly. Since it's Li's choice, it doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. Isn't it? But what if the princess? Was Mo Xiaoyao certain that Princess Ding would win, or did he not care about losing face for the Ding kingdom? If Li loses, I will kneel with her to Princess Lingyun. Mo Xiaoyao calmly replied. Lei Tengfeng's heart shook when he heard this. He almost could not hide the loss of self-control on his face. He turned his gaze to the beautiful woman in the field who was wearing the same moon-white brocade robe as Prince Ding. His hand unconsciously tightened around the wine cup as his gaze deepened and his handsome brows furrowed. In the field, Yi Li and Princess Lingyun were both inspecting the bows in their hands. Princess Lingyun's movements were nimble as she inspected her bow. It was clear that she was an archer from the capital. On the other hand, Yi Li was leisurely inspecting the bow in her hands. She was testing here and there. The surrounding people could not help but feel anxious for her. Princess Ding's slender figure and her slow and jerky movements made people wonder if Princess Ding could even draw the bow. Don't mention shooting an arrow, it was another matter if Princess Ding could even draw the bow. Say it, how do you want to compete? Princess Lingyun was already prepared. She raised her chin and looked at Yi Li arrogantly. Yi Li quickly put down her bow and looked up at Princess Lingyun with a smile. 1 arrow for each person. 1 arrow to determine the winner. Whatever. Princess Lingyun held her bow and said, say it, where should I shoot? Do you want to shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away or a bird in the sky? Hearing Princess Lingyun's words, everyone was even more shocked. They had a deeper understanding of the princess's archery skills. To be able to say that she could shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away so confidently, this princess was indeed an expert. Hua Tianxiang stood behind Madame Hua and tightly clutched her sleeves. She was worried for Yi Li. Yi Li slowly drew her bow and said indifferently, bows and arrows are weapons. They are not used to shoot leaves and birds. So, let's compete in shooting. After she finished speaking, she raised her bow and pointed an arrow at Princess Lingyun. What? Everyone was shocked. They watched as the girl used a standard but not practiced posture to point her bow and arrow at Princess Lingyun. Are you crazy? Are you kidding me? Princess Lingyun cried out involuntarily. They were standing less than 50 paces away from each other. Lingyun was an expert archer. She could naturally see that Yi Li's posture was unfamiliar, but she had definitely learned it before. At this distance, whether it was her or Yi Li, the chances of them missing were not high. So, Yi Li didn't want to compete in archery. Instead, she wanted to compete in courage. Yi Li said with a faint smile, whether it is a sword or an arrow, they are all weapons. Soldiers are lethal weapons. Since this is a competition, we naturally can't harm others. So, we can only trouble Princess Lingyun and this consort to shoot an arrow at each other. Death. Injury. Own. Responsibility. No. She didn't want to marry the emperor and become one of the concubines in the imperial harem. She wanted to marry Prince Ding and become Princess Ding. However, she didn't want to die, nor did she want to experience the feeling of being shot by an arrow. Princess Ding. Isn't this a bit too serious? If something happens. Lei Tengfeng stood up to stop her. Yi Li turned her head to look at him and said with a smile, didn't this consort say that she would be responsible for her own injuries? Moreover, the emperor has already agreed to this consort's competition with Princess Lingyun. Could it be that the heir wants this consort to go back on her words in front of the emperor, empress, and all the officials of Dechu state? How will my Ding King's manor have the face to stand in the capital? Lei Tengfeng felt bitter in his heart. You didn't say that you wanted to bet your life first. Of course, if Princess Lingyun is afraid, she can admit defeat at any time. In the end, Yi Li lightly added in a sentence. This sentence had undoubtedly blocked all of Princess Lingyun's paths of retreat. How could she admit defeat to Yi Li in front of all these people? She took advantage of her unwillingness to admit defeat to blurt out, this princess will not admit defeat. This princess will bet. Very good, let's begin. Yi Li nodded with a satisfied smile. She didn't know why, but Princess Lingyun didn't dare look into her eyes and looked away in a panic. Chapter 103. Mo Jingqi was also caught off guard by this sudden change. Noble consort Lu looked at Yi Li's figure, her eyes revealing a trace of admiration. I think Princess Ding has a good chance of winning. The Empress also knew that although noble consort Lu was born in a family of civil officials, she was a rare woman who was both civil and military. She asked curiously, Noble consort, do you think Princess Ding will win? Noble consort Lu said, this Princess Lingyun is not as bold as she appears. In that case, let's do as Princess Ding says. Mo Jingqi stood up. 1 arrow to determine the winner. If you miss or dodge, you lose. Let's begin. The imperial garden suddenly fell into silence. The eunuch who acted as the host stood in the middle of the two and screamed, Princess consort, please get ready. Then he quickly walked out of the field. 1. The two drew their bows at the same time. What was surprising was that the elegant and graceful Princess Ding did not seem to have much difficulty pulling the bow. 2. Princess Lingyun pulled the bow to the extreme, aiming the arrow at the woman opposite her. She had absolute confidence that as long as she shot this arrow, this Princess Ding who overestimated herself would definitely die. As long as she shot this arrow. Suddenly, Princess Lingyun's hand that held the arrow trembled slightly. She clearly saw the eyes of the woman opposite her. The eyes as cold as snow made her heart fall into an ice cellar in an instant. In Princess Lingyun's eyes, Yi Li seemed to have changed into another person. Her whole body was filled with an unstoppable murderous aura and confidence that she would definitely succeed in one shot. She only looked at her calmly, as if she did not care about the arrow aimed at her at all. It was as if she was certain that the arrow would not hit her at all. The more she thought about it, the more Princess Lingyun's eyes involuntarily looked at the tip of Yi Li's arrow. With some despair, she found that if she did not dodge, even if Yi Li was a novice, that arrow would definitely hit her. Princess Lingyun's forehead was already sweating profusely. Yi Li calmly enjoyed the feeling of the bow and arrow in her hands. Although it still wasn't as smooth as the sniper rifle she had been using for so many years, this was her first time in this world having a shooting duel. Even if it was just teasing a little girl, she still couldn't help but feel a little happier and happier. Looking in the direction of the arrow, he could clearly see the unconcealable fear in Princess Lingyun's eyes. His lips curled into a faint smile. Almost everyone held their breaths as they waited for the final moment to arrive. Lei Tengfeng stared intently at Princess Lingyun. Because of the direction, he couldn't see Yi Li's face, but from her posture, he could tell that Yi Li wasn't familiar with this kind of bow. With Ling Yun's ability, she should have a 90% chance of winning. Why was she so nervous? Mo Xiaoyao calmly sat in his wheelchair. His hands rested on the armrests, but if someone looked closely, they would discover that there was something hidden under his right hand. His gaze also fell on Princess Lingyun, but it wasn't on Princess Lingyun's face. It was on the tip of her arrow. I won't lose. Princess Lingyun tried her best not to look at Yi Li's arrow. She secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva and kept encouraging herself in her heart. But her eyes kept unconsciously drifting to Yi Li's arrow. 3. A sharp sound rang in her ears. Ling Yun could clearly see Yi Li's smile deepen. Her hand pulled back on the bow, preparing to release the arrow. She had already pulled the bowstring to the maximum and released it out of reflex. Whoosh, the arrow brushed past Yi Li's shoulder and landed not far behind her. How could this be? Princess Lingyun was stunned. What was even more shocking was that Yi Li hadn't released the arrow and she had already lost her chance. She stared blankly at Yi Li's smiling face. She could clearly see that she was silently smiling at her. It's my turn. She could clearly see that there was no smile in that smiling face. There was only coldness and killing intent that was colder than the tip of the arrow. She saw Yi Li slowly pull the bowstring to the limit and release the arrow. Whoosh, no. Ling Yun suddenly screamed. She didn't even care about her image as she hugged her head and squatted on the ground. The arrow stabbed into the ground one step away from her. Princess Lingyun stared blankly at the faintly swaying arrow in front of her. Suddenly, She burst into tears. Everyone exchanged glances. Yi leisurely put down the bow in her hands. She smiled at Princess Lingyun and said, "Princess, actually, my hand is very sore. You don't have to worry that I'll shoot you." You. Princess Lingyun cried so hard that her snot couldn't form a sound. She pointed at Yi Li but couldn't speak for a long time. Yi Li smiled at her. She only felt that all the depression she had suffered today was released in an instant. Sure enough, teaching a disobedient brat was the best way to put him in a good mood. Good. Mo Jingqi clapped his hands and smiled. This competition will definitely be won by the princess consort. What does the heir think? Lei Tengfeng's expression was complicated as he looked at the smiling woman not far away. He stood up and said, "The princess consort is indeed a woman who doesn't lose to men. This one is sincerely convinced. Naturally, the princess consort wins." Ling Yun, kneel down and apologize to the princess consort. Lei Tengfeng made a prompt decision and said to Princess Lingyun. Yi Li's request was to apologize in front of all the officials at the palace banquet. However, Lei Tengfeng directly cut off the second half of her sentence and had Ling Yun immediately apologize. This would make people feel that the Xiling princess dared to admit what she had done. Moreover, Ling Yun was crying so miserably right now, it would make people sympathize with her. When it came to the palace banquet at night, everyone would tactfully not mention this matter again. However, if it was dragged to the palace banquet, the news of Ling Yun losing to the princess consort would have spread throughout the palace. After everyone gossiped for a while, their evaluation of Ling Yun would be even lower. Even if Ling Yun kneeled down and apologized, no one would have a good impression of her. More importantly, it would affect his actions later. Kneel. Princess Lingyun's face turned white. She never would have thought that she would lose to a weak Eastern Chu girl in the field she was most proud of. Thinking of the promise she had made in the heat of the moment, it was too late to regret it now. She looked at Lei Tengfeng for help, but all she received was Lei Tengfeng's warning gaze. Looking at the surrounding people, the Eastern Chu emperor, empress, concubines, ministers, and noblewomen, as well as the Nanzhao envoy and princess. Princess Lingyun knew that if she really kneeled down, her reputation would be completely ruined. There's no need to kneel. Princess only needs to apologize to this consort. Yi Li suddenly spoke. Princess Lingyun was stunned. She finally understood that there was no benefit in continuing to cause trouble. She was weak in Eastern Chu and her royal brother was not willing to help her. She could not beat this Princess Ding at all. Gritting her teeth, Princess Lingyun slightly bowed and said, "It was Ling Yun who was insensible and offended Princess Ding. Princess Ding, please forgive this offense." Yi Li nodded with a faint smile and said, "Princess is a guest, there is no need to take it to heart." After saying this, she turned around and ignored Princess Lingyun, walking towards Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao lowered his eyes and the thing under his right hand disappeared. He then raised his head to look at Yi Li in front of him. Although Yi Li's expression was as gentle and indifferent as usual, Mo Xiuyao was certain that he saw a different light in her eyes. Chapter 104. Lei Tengfeng cupped his hands towards Yi Li, silently expressing his thanks. Yi Li nodded slightly, sitting down beside Mo Xiuyao. She tried her best to ignore the gazes from all around her. Princess Lingyun returned to Lei Tengfeng's side in a daze, no longer in the mood to find trouble with Yi Li. Feeling Mo Xiuyao's gaze on her, Yi Li raised her head, asking in confusion, "What's wrong?" Mo Xiuyao calmly said, "It was very dangerous just now. If it wasn't for the fact that Princess Ling Yun's mind was unstable, if it was any other ordinary archer, that arrow would have directly hit Yi Li's body. At best, it would have resulted in both sides suffering heavy injuries." Yi Li shook her head, shrugging her shoulders and smiling. "There won't be any danger. If not for Princess Lingyun, I wouldn't have competed with her in archery." The reason why she chose archery was because she knew that Princess Lingyun's mind was not enough to compete with a sniper, even if it was only for a short moment. Even though she was born in the palace, the arrogant and willful little princess was protected. There was no way she could maintain a calm standard in front of her. Of course, if Princess Lingyun's hand really did not tremble and directly shot the arrow at her, she had other ways to deal with it. Besides, Prince won't let anything happen to me, right? Seeing Mo Xiuyao's disapproving gaze, Yi Li smiled faintly. Mo Xiuyao was startled, nodding lightly. You're right. If Princess Lingyun's arrow had not missed, he would not have let that arrow land on Li's body. Princess Ding, have you learned archery before? Mo Jingqi asked in a clear voice from the main seat. Yi Li stood up, replying respectfully, reporting to your majesty, I haven't. It's just that when I went to uncle's house, brother taught me for fun. I've never studied it seriously. Mo Jingqi smiled meaningfully. Yi Li was able to win against Princess Lingyun, who had studied for many years, even though she had never studied seriously. Her talent and intelligence were both very good. Mo Jingqi held noble consort Lu in his arms and said with a smile, it seems that Princess Ding and my beloved consort are both extraordinary women skilled in both pen and sword. Noble consort Lu replied lightly, you're right, your majesty. After sending off the emperor, empress, and Gue Fei, Yi Li was too lazy to pay attention to the people who came up to compliment or test her. Together with Mo Xiuyao, she found a quiet place to rest in the imperial garden. Most people were tactful enough to not disturb the couple, but there were always one or two exceptions. After rejecting the palace maid sent by Yi Zhaoi to invite her to the small gathering, Yi Li looked at Mo Xiuyao who had been staring at her. She smiled and said, Prince, what's wrong? Mo Xiuyao held the teacup in one hand, casually playing with it. He said, Li is very talented in martial arts. It seems that her foundation is also good. Yi Li did not mind that her skills were known by Mo Xiuyao. Mo Xiuyao was a very cautious and seemingly gentle person, but he was very guarded. It was almost impossible for her not to be known by him after living in the same manner for a long time. Yi Li did not plan to hide it. She needed space to train herself, and even learn more powerful things to strengthen her abilities. Meeting Mo Xiuyao's eyes, Yi Li smiled innocently. If Prince thinks it's not bad, then it should be really not bad. Mo Xiuyao clearly did not intend to get to the bottom of the matter. He smiled and shook his head. If Li likes, there are some martial arts manuals in the study. You can take them to read. Seeing Yi Li's eyes light up at his words, Mo Xiuyao continued with a smile, since Li says she doesn't know swordsmanship, I can find someone to teach Li, is that really okay? The better Li can protect herself, the more assured I will be. Why not? Mo Xiuyao said with a smile. Yi Li instantly felt that marrying a wealthy, understanding, and open-minded husband was too fortunate. Great, thank you, Yi Li said with a smile. Mo Xiuyao shook his head lightly. We are family. If you need anything, you can tell me directly. There is no need to thank me. Seeing the sincere smile on Yi Li's face that he had never seen before, Mo Xiuyao couldn't help but feel that finding someone to teach Li swordsmanship was not a bad idea. The palace banquet in the evening proceeded in a strange atmosphere. When Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao entered the hall together, all eyes in the hall immediately focused on her. Clearly, the competition in the Imperial Garden in the afternoon had caused Yi Li to be in the limelight. In just one short afternoon, not only had the officials in the Imperial Garden appeared, but everyone at the banquet had heard of what had happened in the afternoon. Seeing Murong Ting winking at her while sitting with Qin Zheng and Su Qingfeng's undisguised praise, Yi Li had no doubt that this matter had spread throughout the capital. But she didn't know how it would spread. Would they say that Princess Ding was skilled in both the pen and the sword, or that Princess Ding was so valiant that she scared the arrogant Princess of Xiling to tears? Thinking of the latter possibility, Yi Li couldn't help but lower her head and laugh. The so-called palace banquet was nothing more than good wine and food, singing and dancing to celebrate peace. Yi Li listlessly listened to the polite exchanges between the emperor and the foreign envoys, or the whispers of the officials at the side. She saw some dishes that she liked to eat. In any case, she could not expect to be full from the food at this banquet. She could just wait until she returned to the fu to eat a midnight snack. Until a bright red dress appeared in the middle of the singing and dancing in the hall, Yi Li looked at the beautiful dancing in the hall with some surprise. She tilted her head and asked, "Why is Yaoji here?" Mo Xiuyao chuckled softly and said, "They must have specially invited her to perform in the palace. Yaoji was born in the musical house and her dancing skills are the best in the capital. Last year at the Empress Dowager's birthday, she was specially invited to perform in the palace." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked, "Prince, what do you think?" Mo Xiuyao said, "Of course it's good." "What do you think, Li?" Yi Li looked back for a long time and nodded, "It's indeed good." She had heard of Yaoji's reputation. It could be said that she was a wonderful woman in the capital. She was born in the musical house and amazed the capital with her zither skills and dancing skills. She became the owner of the #1 brothel in the capital before the age of 25. She had contacts with many dignitaries in the capital. It was said that Mu Yang, the heir of Marquis Mu Yang, was her guest. Young Master Feng San also called her a friend. Since ancient times, only such a woman could live in such a carefree and unrestrained manner in such an era. The dance of the #1 prostitute in the capital was naturally amazing. At a glance, at least 70% of the men present showed a covetous look. And the women also showed a look of jealousy and resentment. Naturally, there were also people who looked at him with pure admiration, but only a very small number of people. After the dance, Yaoji quickly disappeared outside the hall, leaving only a touch of fragrance that made people reluctant to leave. Looking at the bustling people in the hall with different expressions, Yi Li only felt more bored. After telling Mo Xiuyao that she wanted to go out to get some fresh air, Yi Li quietly left the hall with Qing Yuan and Qing Shuang. The night wind outside the hall blew gently, gradually dispersing the smell of rouge and wine from the hall. Yi Li took a deep breath. Ignoring the music in the hall, the imperial palace was exceptionally quiet at night. Walking slowly on the quiet path, Yi Li's restless mood gradually calmed down. When she was about to sit in the pavilion in front, a strange palace maid blocked their way. "Greetings, Princess Ding." Chapter 105. Qing Yuan stood in front of Yi Li vigilantly and asked, "Who are you?" The palace maid bowed and said, "This servant is Yi Zhaoyi's palace maid. Yi Zhaoyi invites Ding Wangfei to Yaohua Palace for a chat." Yi Yu was pregnant, so she did not attend the banquet in the evening. In the afternoon, she sent a palace maid to invite, but Yi Li declined her invitation on the spot. Yi Li naturally knew Yi Yu's thoughts, but even if they were sisters, she did not intend to let Yi Yu and the Yi family use her. The main reason was that Yi Yu's plans and ideas were too unreliable. If she was careful and knew her place, she might be able to give birth to the child safely and have someone to rely on in the future. Even if she had only seen her a few times, Yi Li still felt that the pregnant Yi Yu was not as pampered as the Yi family thought. "This consort is a little tired today. Tell Yi Zhaoyi that if there is anything, this consort will go to the palace to pay respects in 2 days and then talk with her. Let's forget about it today." The palace maid looked a little anxious and said, "Forgive me, Wang Fei. Zhaoyi Nyang does have something urgent to discuss with Wang Fei." Yi Li said lightly, "Even if there is something urgent, I'm afraid it's useless to discuss it with this consort. By the way, Yi Zhaoyi's mother, Wang Furen, is also in the hall at this time. Why don't this consort ask someone to help you invite her out? What do you think?" Wang Fei, Zhaoyi Nyang only asks Wang Fei to go and have an audience. The palace maid said. When she said the word, "have an audience," there was a hint of coercion. Yi Li's face sank, and she sneered and said indifferently, "I don't know that a Zhaoyi needs I to go and have an audience with her in the middle of the night." The word, "have an audience," was emphasized. The status of Ding Wangfei was very honorable. Even in the palace, she only needed to bow to the Empress and Empress Dowager. The Guifei only received half a bow. Not to mention a mere Jiaoyi. If they really met, Yi Yu would have to bow to Yili to show respect to the Ding Wangfu. This. Nubi misspoke, Wangfei, please forgive me. Yi Jiaoyi does have an urgent matter. Please, Wangfei, for the sake of Jiaoyi's sister, go there. Yili looked suspiciously at the palace maid and slowly said, speaking of which, this consort has been to Yaohua Palace before. You seem a little unfamiliar. The palace maid forced a smile and said, this servant's appearance is average. Wang Fei might not remember me. Yili shook her head and said, that's not right. This consort is sure that you are not one of Yi Jiaoyi's 6 senior palace maids and 8 palace maids in the inner palace. Is it possible that Yi Jiaoyi will send a sweeping maid to invite this consort? I. The palace maid panicked and turned to leave. Yili winked at Qing Wan. Qing Wan stepped forward and effortlessly gave her a chop on the back of her neck. The palace maid's body went limp and fell to the ground. Princess consort. Qing Yu frowned and looked up at Yili, waiting for instructions. Yili frowned slightly and suddenly turned to look at the flowers on the side of the road. Who is it? Princess Ding. A slender figure came out. Under the moonlight, the enchanting face added a sense of calmness. Miss Yaoji. Yili said, why are you here? Yaoji smiled sweetly and said, I don't dare to call myself Mississippi Princess Ding can call me Yaoji. Yaoji came forward and glanced at the palace maid who was unconscious on the ground. She raised her eyebrows and smiled, Princess Ding, this is? Yili smiled and said, didn't Miss Yaoji hear it just now? It's nothing. There are always a few strange things in the palace. She waved her hand and a black shadow appeared behind Yili like a ghost. Princess consort. Yili pointed to the palace maid on the ground and said, take her away. Don't scare her. The black shadow nimbly picked her up and disappeared into the night after a few leaps. I heard from Feng San that Princess Ding is straightforward. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation. Yaoji smiled and said. Young Master Feng San has mentioned me to Miss. She remembered that she wasn't familiar with the famous young Master Feng San. Yaoji covered her mouth and smiled, her eyes shining. Feng San has a high opinion of Princess Consort. Yaoji has always admired his taste. It is a blessing of 3 lifetimes to see Princess Consort today. Yili lowered her eyes and smiled, it is Yaoji's fortune to see Miss Yaoji dance. I will keep what happened just now a secret for Princess Consort. Yaoji blinked her eyes and asked with a bit of naughtiness on her enchanting face. Yili smiled and said, thank you. Why is Miss still here so late? Yaoji sighed helplessly and said, some people and things are too annoying. I just want to find a place to hide. I didn't think I would be fated to meet Princess Consort. Yili understood. Yaoji was beautiful and skilled. There must be many people present who were lustful. But those who dared to pester in the imperial palace weren't simple characters. How about I send someone to escort Miss out of the palace? Yaoji showed a grateful expression and said, thank you, Princess Consort. It's nothing. Turning back to give some orders to Qingyu, Yili bid farewell to Yaoji and returned to the hall filled with singing and dancing. Mo Xiaoyao saw her return and gave her a questioning look. Yili shook her head to express her helplessness. Walking to Mo Xiaoyao's side, she sat down and told him about what happened in the imperial garden in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, I will send someone to investigate later. Li should stay with me tonight. Yili nodded indifferently. Only then did she realize that the atmosphere in the hall seemed to be stranger than when she left. The original singing and dancing had long stopped. Everyone's eyes were faintly looking in the direction of the envoys from West Hill and Nanzhao. Even Yili's quiet entrance didn't attract much attention. Hua Tianxiang gave Yili a strange smile and pointed her chin in the direction of West Hill. Yili looked over and saw that Princess Lingyun of West Hill was crying with red eyes. Today was obviously not Princess Lingyun's lucky day. She was crying again after such a short time. What's wrong? Yili asked in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao smiled coldly and said, the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojoseon said that West Hill and Dechu State wanted to marry. Before he finished, Princess Lingyun objected. In the end, the emperor agreed to marry West Hill, but Princess Lingyun wouldn't enter the palace. And then Nanzhao sent the king of Nanzhao's letter of credence, expressing his willingness to marry Princess Xixia into Dechu State. The emperor's meaning is for Princess Xixia to enter the palace and Princess Lingyun to Prince Li. Yili quickly glanced at Yi Ying, who was sitting beside Mo Jingli. As expected, she was staring at Princess Lingyun with a dark expression. On Nanzhao's side, Princess Xixia's expression was also very ugly. Mo Jingli's expression was also clearly ugly. He gloomily stared at the aggrieved Princess Lingyun. Yili looked thoughtfully at Mo Jingqi, who was clearly very satisfied with her arrangements. For a moment, she didn't understand what the emperor was planning. Was it purely because Princess Lingyun had angered him that he was marrying her to Prince Li? But Princess Xixia had been in the Chu capital for several months. It was impossible that Mo Jingqi didn't know about the rumors about Princess Xixia and Mo Jingli. Chapter 106. The emperor will not allow Jingli to have any contact with Nanzhao. Even without Princess Lingyun, the emperor will not marry Princess Xixia to him. Seeming to understand Yili's doubts, Mo Xiaoyao said faintly beside her, Nanzhao is mostly barbarians. It is said that the country is small and the people are weak, but their customs are extremely valiant. It is only because there are too few people that it is difficult for them to have any influence. Yili said softly, the emperor does not wish for Li Wang to have any relationship with Nanzhao. But Shi Ling seems to be more powerful than Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao laughed softly, Shi Ling and the Dechu state are enemies. Unless Mo Jingli commits treason, Shi Ling will not give him any benefits. Besides, the emperor does not wish for a prince with Shi Ling blood to appear among the imperial heirs. Yili suddenly understood and looked sympathetically at Mo Jingli. It seems that this younger brother of the emperor did not make his older brother the emperor feel at ease. Mo Xiaoyao laughed softly, Li, your heart is too soft. There has never been a person without ambition in the imperial family. Yili was startled and carefully considered Mo Xiaoyao's words. Looking at Mo Jingli, her gaze became more thoughtful. But, did Mo Jingli's brain really have the ability to think of such a complicated matter? Or was he pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? Returning to the Ding Palace, Yili couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Spending half a day in the palace was more tiring than spending a month in total. After bidding farewell to Mo Xiaoyao, Yili returned to her own courtyard. Mother Lin and Mother Wei immediately led people to welcome her. It was clear that what happened in the palace in the afternoon had already been sent back to the palace. The two mother servants worriedly scanned Yili from head to toe. Only after confirming that she was safe and sound did they relax. Yili had no choice but to ask for a midnight snack to fill her stomach. Mother Lin waved her hand and had someone bring over a bowl of chicken porridge that had obviously been prepared earlier. Yili looked at the chicken porridge in front of her, which was enough for 3 people. Nanny, although I am very hungry, I can't eat so much all of a sudden. Wei Mama glanced at her with dissatisfaction and said, Princess, do you think you are the only one who is hungry? Yili blinked blankly. Qing Wan and the others had already gone down to eat. Wei Mama's face was full of disappointment as she stuffed the chicken porridge and the tray into her hands, saying, Prince has gone to the study. Wang Fei should send it over to eat with the prince. There's no need for that. I'll get someone to pass it to Ah Jin. My lady. Mother Lin sternly stared at Yili and said, You are Prince's wife. How can you let someone else do something like delivering supper? Did Erfuren forget to call you a wife when you were in the Su family? Seeing Mother Lin's expression that was about to lecture her, Yili hurriedly picked up the porridge and said, Nanny, I know. I'll send it over to Prince. Without waiting for Mother Lin to respond, she ran out with the chicken porridge. Yili felt that she had been wronged. The two nannies were very naggy, but compared to the nanny, Yili was more afraid of this Mother Lin who followed her mother. As long as she opened her mouth, she would quote the classics, explain the reasons, and lower her head to admit her mistake. A normal person would not be able to withstand this kind of verbal and mental attack. Helplessly, she walked in the corridors of the Wang Fu with the midnight snack. The Yahuan behind her also tactfully followed at a distance that was not too far or too close. Mo Xiaoyao still lived in the courtyard he lived in before the wedding, right next to Yili's courtyard. So before Yili could finish cursing in her heart, she was already standing outside Mo Xiaoyao's study. Just as she was about to knock, Mo Xiaoyao's voice came from inside, Is it Li? Come in. Pushing the door open, Mo Xiaoyao was writing something under the candlelight. Seeing Yili come in, he raised his head to look at her and asked, Why haven't you rested yet? Yili walked over and put the things in her hands to the side, asking, Did I disturb you? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. Looking at the things on the table, he raised an eyebrow and smiled, You came to deliver the midnight snack? For some reason, Yili's face became slightly hot. She pretended to be calm and asked, What? I can't deliver the midnight snack to you. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and put down the pen in his hands, smiling, I'm just curious why Li would take the initiative to deliver the midnight snack to me. And, no wonder no one thought to send me food even though I've been back for so long. As expected, after marrying a Wang Fei, other people don't care. Yili helplessly rolled her eyes at him and said, Are you going to eat or not? Mo Xiaoyao nodded, Wang Fei personally delivered it, how can I not eat? The two sat down at the table. Yili took 2 bowls and poured a bowl of porridge for each of them. She first handed a bowl to Mo Xiaoyao. Even though the two of them had eaten together almost every day, it was the first time they ate the midnight snack together. As they ate the porridge, Mo Xiaoyao thought and said, If you don't have anything to do tomorrow, how about accompanying me to see De Saw? Yili nodded and said, It's been so long, we should go see De Saw. I hope De Saw won't blame us. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, De Saw won't care about this. Do I need to prepare anything? Yili asked. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, We're just going to see De Saw. Thinking about that sister-in-law she had never met, Yili could only sigh inside. For a woman at her most beautiful age to let her life wither away, it really made people sigh. How did you deal with the palace maid tonight? Thinking, Yili asked about the palace maid who had blocked the way in the palace. Mo Xiaoyao said with a frown, That wasn't a palace maid. She wasn't. Yili was shocked. When had the imperial palace become a place where outsiders could come and go as they pleased? Was the emperor able to sleep at night? Mo Xiaoyao said with a smile, She wasn't a palace maid registered in the palace, but that doesn't mean she isn't a member of the palace. There are some capable people in the palace who always have a few hidden cards in their hands. But, that palace maid didn't seem to have any outstanding areas. Mo Xiaoyao said faintly, Sometimes, it's people like this who don't have any outstanding areas that are the trump cards. Can't you find out who she is? She's a death warrior. Mo Xiaoyao said. Yili understood. If a death warrior failed the mission, they would die, so naturally, she couldn't find out anything. But, those who can have such a death warrior in the palace don't know. So, Li, if you must enter the palace in the future, remember to be careful. I know. Yili nodded. She also didn't have the hobby of seeking death. The previous Princess Ding Wenshi didn't live in the Ding King's residence. As early as the 2nd year after Mo Xiaowen's death, Wenshi moved to the Wuyuan nunnery outside the city to cultivate. Mo Xiuwen's 2 concubines also moved with her. Ever since she moved to the Wuyuan nunnery, other than the anniversary of Mo Xiuwen's death every year, Wen Shi had never returned to the Ding King's residence. In the past few years, Mo Xiuyao had also been in seclusion because of many reasons, so although he respected this sister-in-law, he wasn't familiar with her. Because she had obtained Mo Xiuyao's approval, Yili woke up early to do some training openly. Then, she accompanied Mo Xiuyao to have breakfast together. Both of them then took a carriage to the Wuyuan nunnery outside the city. Chapter 107. Wuyu Nunnery was located on a beautiful hill on the outskirts of the capital. It was also the family temple of the Ding Kingdom. Therefore, there were no pilgrims or tourists who came to offer incense. It was very peaceful and pleasant on the way. As soon as they entered the nunnery, they could smell the lingering scent of sandalwood in the air. Yili wrinkled her nose as she was not used to it. Mo Xiuyao looked at her. What's wrong? Yili was a little embarrassed as she whispered, I don't believe in Buddha. If she went in later, she could not decide whether to pray or not. It was meaningless for a person who did not believe to pray in front of Buddha. It would not be polite in other people's eyes. Mo Xiuyao smiled faintly. No wonder I have never seen Li go out of the capital to offer incense. In the Chu capital, regardless of whether it was a young lady from a noble family or a pretty girl from a small family, they loved to go to the big temples and nunneries in the capital to offer incense or ask for lots. Some asked for everything to go smoothly, some asked for their husband. But it seemed that they had never heard of the Yi family's third young lady going to the temple to ask for lots to offer incense. Yili lowered her eyebrows and said, Since I don't believe in Buddha, how can I ask for his protection? If Buddha is really spiritual, how can she be so busy with so many good men and women? Mo Xiuyao raised his eyebrows and looked at Yili with a smile. So, Li still believes in herself more? Yili raised her head and smiled brightly. If I can't even believe in myself, who else can I believe in this world? Mo Xiuyao nodded in agreement. Good, I also don't believe in Buddha. Li can do as she pleases. Not long after, a little nun came out from inside to bring the two of them in. Wen Shi was a very gentle woman. Although her appearance was not very outstanding, the calm and peaceful expression between her eyebrows added a unique flavor to her appearance. Even the gray monk robe could not hide the gentleness and grace of a scholarly family. Seeing the two of them come in, her calm eyes did not have any ripples. It was obvious that her heart was as still as water, or it could be said that her heart was withered. Xiuyao greets sister-in-law. Mo Xiuyao pulls Yili forward and says to Wen, Sister-in-law, this is Li. Yili went forward and bowed respectfully. Greetings, sister-in-law. Wen Shi's gaze fell on Mo Xiuyao's wheelchair and face, and then quickly turned to Yili. A trace of sadness flashed through her calm eyes. She said softly, Forget it. Sister-in-law, come and have a seat. Yili thanked Madame Wen and sat down beside her. Madame Wen pulled her to have a look. She picked up an old brocade box and handed it to her. She said, My sister-in-law is not a worldly person. I don't have a gift for you. This was given to me by Prince, your eldest brother, when I had just married into the Ding King's manor. He said that it was left behind by his imperial mother. Keep it. This. Although the brocade box looked old, its surface was very smooth. It could be seen that someone often took it out to wipe it. This should be a souvenir that Wen Shi kept. Madame Wen smiled faintly and shook her head. Keep it. I don't need these now. Yili no longer refused. She put away the brocade box and said, Thank you, sister-in-law. Madame Wen looked at Yili and said, Your eldest brother only has D as a brother. As a sister-in-law, I am of no use. In the future, sister-in-law and D need to support each other and live a good life. Yili understood that Madame Wen was talking about the change in the Ding King's manor. She did not stay in the Ding King's manor to manage the affairs for Mo Xiuyao. Instead, she left the seriously injured and disabled Mo Xiaoyao and left the manor to cultivate. Yili did not think that Madame Wen was wrong. At that time, she was a girl who was not even 20 years old. She was not even a girl that could be cultivated by a noble family. When her husband suddenly passed away and the only bloodline in the manor was seriously injured and disabled, a woman who was not strong enough could not support the entire Ding King's manor. Thank you, sister-in-law, for your teachings. Yili nodded. She glanced at Mo Xiaoyao and said softly, since I am married to the prince, we will share honor and disgrace in the future. Good. Then I am relieved. Madame Wen nodded with relief. Yili frowned. She hesitated for a moment before saying, sister-in-law, you must be lonely living here alone. I don't know if you should return to the manor. It is not inappropriate for sister-in-law to cultivate in the manor. Madame Wen shook her head and said, I am used to the peace here. I will not be used to going back. Yili persuaded again and again, but Madame Wen refused. She had no choice but to give up. After talking for a while, Madame Wen asked the two to stay for lunch. She said that she wanted to copy scriptures and asked Mo Xiaoyao to take Yili to walk around. Although Wuyuan Nunnery was a family temple, it was not small. Yili pushed Mo Xiaoyao through the quiet bamboo forest behind the nunnery. Because of Madame Wen, her mood was inevitably heavy. Li, if it were you, you would not be like sister-in-law, right? After a long time, Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Yili nodded. She suddenly remembered that Mo Xiaoyao could not see her movements and said, I won't. I will try my best to live a better life. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, that is good. Sister-in-law is actually not suitable to be the king's princess consort. Our Mo family has wronged her. If it were not for the fact that elder brother wanted to avoid Mo Jingqi's suspicion, perhaps he would not have chosen Madame Wen, who was born in an ordinary scholarly family. Yili thought for a moment and said, perhaps sister-in-law does not regret it. Every time Madame Wen mentioned her husband, Yili could see a faint gentleness and reminiscence in her calm eyes. Perhaps Mo Xiaowen had chosen her for the king's mansion, but Madame Wen might have feelings for Mo Xiaowen, or Mo Xiaowen might have feelings for Madame Wen. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, the king's mansion has never given her a chance to regret it. The Chu state did not forbid women who had lost their fathers from remarrying, but it was not so easy for widows in the king's mansion to remarry. Without enough courage to face the world, Madame Wen could not even think of making herself regret. But, Li, I allow you to regret it. Prince, tell me honestly, if you die, can I remarry? Yili raised her brows and asked. Mo Xiaoyao did not object and nodded. And, that is what I meant. Yili looked at the sky and rolled her eyes at a place where Mo Xiaoyao could not see. A wave of anger that came out of nowhere made her laugh coldly. Then, does Prince want to die early, or do you want to die early? She raised her brows at her strange words. Mo Xiaoyao smiled, I still want to die peacefully. Really? That's not good news. Move aside. Before Yili could finish her sentence, Mo Xiaoyao suddenly turned and pushed Yili away. Swoosh! 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 A burst of sound pierced through the air and 3 diamond-shaped darts that emitted a cold blue light were nailed to the bamboo beside Yili. Since you're here, why don't you come out and meet me? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and stared at the hand that was placed on the wheelchair armrest. Ha! Mo Xiaoyao, you're finally willing to come out of the king's mansion. I thought you would hide inside for the rest of your life and not dare to come out to meet people. A presumptuous laugh sounded and a tall figure appeared in the bamboo forest. Soon, a group of black-clothed people surrounded the 3 people in the middle. Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and looked at the person who came. The smile on his lips was as cold as snow. Do you dare to take off the veil on your face and say it again? Chapter 108. The incomer's laughter suddenly stopped. His gray eyes suddenly contracted. He snorted softly and turned to look at Yi Li standing at the side. "This is Princess Ding." "Yes, sir." "I have not asked for your guidance," Yi Li said with a nod. "Such courage," the man praised. He seemed to look regretfully at Yi Li and said, "Such a pity, Mo Xiuyao, with such a woman buried with you, you should have no regrets, right?" The man clearly did not want to waste words. He waved his hand and the frowning men in black immediately surrounded them. "Take Wang Fei away first," Mo Xiuyao ordered coolly. Several figures quickly flashed into the crowd. A Jin landed in front of Mo Xiuyao with a long sword and looked warily at the surrounding men in black. Two of the shadow guards landed beside Yi Li, one on her left and one on her right, wanting to send her away. The remaining people were already fighting with the men in black. Yi Li swept a glance. A Jin had only brought 7 or 8 people. She had taken away 2, so there were only 5 left. There were at least 20 to 30 assassins in black. Without time to think, Yi Li waved away the shadow guard who was pulling her and said, "Stay and help." Wang Fei. The shadow guard stilled and wanted to say something in disagreement. Yi Li had already lost her patience and walked past them. She casually took down an assassin who was trying to sneak up on her and said coldly, "What are you talking about? Take care of these people first." As she spoke, she nimbly kicked away an attack from another. When she landed, she stepped on the body of the assassin who had just been put on the ground and was about to jump up. The assassin on the ground wailed and then fainted. The 2 shadow guards exchanged a look. They would follow Wang Fei's orders and take care of these assassins first. Even though they were well-trained shadow guards, they did not understand what move Wang Fei had used. However, this did not stop them from seeing Wang Fei block an assassin in 2 moves and stomp on another assassin until he fainted. If he was lucky, he would be bedridden for 3 to 5 months. If he was unlucky, he would be paralyzed for life. Yi Li's attack was successful, and her heart was at ease. Although Yi Li had a certain level of confidence in her skills, she had never been able to determine the depth of ancient martial arts. After all, in this era, she had never really encountered a situation that required her to use her full strength. Judging from Mr. Feng Yu's light body technique, he would not be easy to deal with. After all, in modern times, no matter how powerful you are, you can't fly everywhere. But fortunately, not everyone had young Master Feng Yu's light body technique of flying around. If it was only close combat, Yi Li felt that she could deal with most of the experts. These assassins clearly did not think that this seemingly harmless Princess Ding would be able to knock down one person in one move. By the time they regained their senses, the second person had been knocked down by Yi Li's elbow. Yi Li had learned many things in her previous life. She had learned martial arts, taekwondo, judo, and so on from a young age. Of course, she had many brothers and sisters at home, so she had plenty of fighting experience. After entering the army, especially the special forces, the direction of learning had changed from defeating the opponent to killing the opponent. Women were not as strong as men, so Yi Li's focus had always been on technique and speed. She wanted to kill the opponent in one move. Not to mention the women, even the men in the team did not dare to exchange blows with her. In the beginning, she was not very familiar with it. After knocking down 2 people, Yi Li gradually felt that the feeling of the past was slowly returning. The results of her unrelenting training over the years were showing. Otherwise, no matter how much combat experience Yi Li had and how many techniques she had, it would be useless if her body could not keep up. Wang, Princess Consort. Jin, who had been loyally guarding Mo Xiuyao, couldn't help but be shocked speechless when he saw the scene. Was the person who had kicked an assassin taller than him until he spat out blood really the gentle and graceful Princess Consort? Jin vaguely remembered that one night, he seemed to have seen Princess Consort use some method to knock Prince Li unconscious. He had always thought that Princess Consort had used some hidden weapon. Now, it seemed that it was completely possible that she had used brute force. Yi Li. Mo Xiaoyao's voice rang out from behind her. At the same time, a sharp sword swung at her from behind. Yi Li hurriedly bent back and barely dodged the sword that was coming at her. At the same time, a dagger that had appeared in her hand at some unknown time swept across the wrist that was holding the sword. Then she grabbed that hand and used his standing posture to twist backwards. With a crack, the person's arm fell to the ground with his eyes open. Yi Li looked down in puzzlement. At some unknown time, a small knife had been stabbed into the person's back. The blade had been stabbed into the flesh and only the handle was left outside. Clearly, he had been killed with one blow. Yi Li raised an eyebrow. She quickly dodged the entanglements of the assassins and came to Mo Xiaoyao's side. Mo Xiaoyao said with a frown, "Didn't I tell you to leave first?" Yi Li and Ajin were on guard against the surrounding assassins. She said, "What if we encounter another group of people when we go out? Will Dassaw be fine? Someone has gone to protect Dassaw." Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "There are many mechanisms in Wuyu Nunnery. If those people had barged into Wuyu Nunnery first, we would have discovered them long ago." In this short period of time, more than half of the 20 over assassins had fallen. The man who had been standing at the side watching sneered, "The shadow guard of Ding King's palace is indeed worthy of their reputation. It's a pity that there are too few of them." The man suddenly jumped up and the long sword in his hand quickly stabbed towards Mo Xiaoyao. Ajin immediately went forward with his sword to block him. The two of them had exchanged more than 10 blows in an instant. But Ajin was only a youth in his teens. With a moment of carelessness, he was knocked away by the man's arrow. A hideous bloody wound was left on his right arm. The man did not pay attention to Ajin. After dodging his sword, he immediately turned towards Mo Xiaoyao again. Ajin cried out in alarm. He wanted to get up to save him but he was held back by the two assassins behind him. "Li, move aside." Mo Xiaoyao pushed Yi Li away. At the same time, he moved his wheelchair backwards. After dodging the first sword, an even fiercer second sword came right after. A person sitting in a wheelchair who was unable to move was naturally not as nimble as a person standing. Mo Xiaoyao turned his head and stabbed his sword into the back of the wheelchair. At the same time, Mo Xiaoyao suddenly stretched out a hand to pinch the blade of the sword. With a slight movement of his sleeve, a bunch of concealed weapons flew towards the man. The man was startled. He quickly withdrew his sword and quickly retreated a few feet away to avoid the concealed weapons that were flying towards him. The man sneered and once again rushed forward. He had clearly seen that Mo Xiaoyao's greatest weakness was that he was unable to move. No matter how great his ability was, no matter how many concealed weapons he had, there would be a time when he ran out of them. Mo Xiaoyao did not dodge anymore. With a schwa sound, a long whip flew out. The distance between the two of them was pulled apart. For a moment, neither of them could do anything to the other. Yi Li stood at the side and was not in a hurry. From time to time, she would help take care of someone who wanted to sneak attack Mo Xiaoyao. At the same time, she stared at that person, trying to figure out his weakness. Finally, when Mo Xiaoyao's long whip wrapped around the man's sword, Yi Li sneered. She pulled out the golden hairpin on her head and threw it at the man's wrist. The moment the man was forced to let go of his sword, she rushed forward and mercilessly attacked the man's vital points with her dagger. Yi Li's moves were definitely vicious even if one looked at all the martial arts manuals. In just 3 to 5 moves, the man's right arm and left shoulder had been stabbed. Yi Li snorted in dissatisfaction. She ignored the man's right hand and stabbed the dagger into the man's chest. The man's expression changed. His right hand quickly and fiercely slapped towards Yi Li. At this time, it was too late for Yi Li to retreat. Suddenly, the slender tail of the whip wrapped around Yi Li's waist and she was quickly pulled back by a force. Yi Li smoothly avoided the man's right hand and landed steadily in front of Mo Xiaoyao. Chapter 109. Not far away, the man's face was ashen white. He gritted his teeth as blood poured from the wound in his chest. When he had been pulled away by Mo Xiuyao's long whip, Yi Li had taken the opportunity to twist the dagger in his chest. The sharp dagger had turned half a circle in his chest before being pulled out. At this time, there was a bloody hole in his chest that couldn't be covered. Yi Li looked down at the dagger in her hand and frowned in dissatisfaction. This dagger was trash compared to her favorite tri-edged bayonet. Cough cough, such a good ding country Wang Fei. I didn't think that you had hidden your skills so well. The man pressed on the wound in his chest and coughed before speaking in a raspy voice. I won't attack if people don't attack me. Yi Li stared at him and said coldly. It's my loss today. Mo Xiuyao, you're lucky today to have married such a powerful Wang Fei. The man glanced at his subordinates, who had been taken care of, and knew that the assassination had failed on the verge of success. Even if there were still 7 or 8 of them, his subordinates could not match the shadow guard of the Ding country Wang Fu if they had the same number of subordinates. However, you can dodge once or twice, but you can't dodge 8 or 10 times. Mo Xiuyao, do you know how many people want your life? Ha ha. I'll wait for you underground. Finishing, the man gave up on Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li. He shouted harshly, give up the mission, retreat. Then as the other assassins retreated, they blocked the path of the shadow guard that wanted to chase. In the end, they were killed by one of them. Chase. Mo Xiuyao shook his head and said, don't chase a cornered enemy. Let's go back first. The shadow guard that wanted to chase immediately stopped in their tracks. Under Ajin's orders, they checked the assassins on the ground. Ajin ignored the wound on his right arm and tightly gripped his sword. Wang Fei, you're very strong. Yi Li shook her head, I was just lucky. Although he had won that battle easily, if not for Mo Xiuyao's help, he would have been seriously injured even if he had been able to defeat the assassin. In the end, whether it was strength or agility, he was still lacking. There were a few times when he clearly hit that person, but because of the lack of strength, it was not enough to cause significant damage. Furthermore, even if he found the opponent's weakness, he would not be able to succeed because his speed was not fast enough. Very powerful, Ajin can't beat him. Ajin insisted. Yi Li smiled and said, if I can't deal with him in a quarter of an hour, I'll be the one to die. Wang Fei is very powerful. Can Ajin learn martial arts from Wang Fei? Ajin was a stubborn child and stared at Yi Li. If he was as powerful as Wang Fei, there would be no need for the prince to make a move. Mo Xiuyao looked at Yi Li with a complicated expression and said, I thought that Miss Li only knew how to protect herself, but it seems that I was wrong. Miss Li is always able to surprise me. He had seen how Yi Li had fought the assassin. That gaze and the cleanliness of her attacks were not things that normal women could achieve. Even many of the shadow guard were not as decisive and vicious as her. He was certain that even if 3 shadow guards attacked her at the same time, it may not be Yi Li who lost. But Mo Xiuyao could not understand. Yi Li had been raised in a boudoir from a young age, how could she have such skills? Those who did not know would think that this was a person who was used to fighting on the battlefield, and not a daughter of a prestigious family. Yi Li smiled faintly and was not in a hurry to explain herself, as long as the prince does not feel that it is a shock. Mo Xiuyao looked at her for a long time. Finally, he sighed and asked, Miss Li, are you really the Yi family's 3rd miss and the Su family's granddaughter? Yi Li said, naturally. Then. Wait until you want to say it. Yi Li was stunned. She looked at Mo Xiuyao and did not say anything for a long time. With Mo Xiuyao and the Ding King's palace's situation, to be able to say such words made her feel very surprised. After a while, Yi Li said in a low voice, although I cannot tell you right now, I can guarantee that I am Yi Li. Moreover, I did not marry into the Ding King's palace with any motive. I believe you. Aren't we husband and wife? Mo Xiuyao said in a low voice. Many thanks. Yi Li's heart felt warm as she said in a low voice. It wasn't that she didn't think about what she would do if she was discovered. Originally, she thought that she would first learn martial arts from the master Mo Xiaoyao found and then slowly get used to it. Actually, this seemed very unreliable. At least she wasn't sure if she could hide it from Mo Xiaoyao. If she aroused Mo Xiaoyao's suspicions, then it would be even more troublesome. Now, it saved her a lot of trouble. No matter what, at least Mo Xiaoyao was willing to believe in her. No matter how much he believed, it was already much better than what she had originally expected. Miss Li, be careful. While she was lost in thought, she suddenly heard Mo Xiaoyao's voice. Yi Li suddenly turned around and a sleeve arrow shot towards her. The dagger in Yi Li's hand instantly flew out. A clear shadow moved in front of her and a figure pushed her to the ground. Mo Xiaoyao. Yi Li hesitantly called out. She raised her hand to support Mo Xiaoyao's back and instantly felt wet. Mo Xiaoyao powerlessly fell beside her and said with a faint smile, I'm fine. Prince. Jean rushed over to help Mo Xiaoyao up. Mo Xiaoyao's face was deathly pale as he frowned and said, I'm fine. See if there are any survivors. Yi Li sat up and looked in front of her. The person who had just shot the sleeve arrow had already fallen to the ground, dead. And that person was the person she had knocked unconscious before. She didn't know when he had woken up. She couldn't help but bitterly laugh in her heart. After leaving the battlefield for so long, did she forget what it meant to be vigilant? She had actually left several survivors in this kind of battle. No. In reality, other than the last one, she hadn't killed a single one. If these people woke up at some unknown time, she couldn't help but shiver. A slightly warm hand covered her hand. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and said with a faint smile, Miss Li, I'm fine. Yi Li lightly bit her lips and said hatefully, you're injured and you're fine. Then how can you be fine? Letting Jean support Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li got up and took back her dagger to wipe it clean. Then she tore the clothes on his back and checked that the blood flowing out was normal. There should be no poison on the arrow. She was slightly relieved. Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, I'm fine as long as I'm not dead. Yi Li gritted her teeth and waved her hand to let Jean and the people beside her take him back to the Wuyuan nunnery. Without her order, the shadow guard had already flown away. He must have gone to find a doctor. When they returned to the Wuyuan nunnery, as Mo Xiaoyao said, there were no assassins in the Wuyuan nunnery. Wen had been waiting for them at the door after receiving the news. Seeing a group of people coming back, they hurried to welcome them and led them to the prepared guest room. Although Mo Xiaoyao's injury didn't look serious now, Yi Li had just checked that the assassin's sleeve arrows were all barbed. She could imagine how bloody the arrows would be when they were taken out later. Worried that Wen would be frightened, Yi Li asked Wen to go back to the room to have a rest. Wen looked at her and still went to prepare food for them with a worried look. Chapter 110. Mo Xiaoyao sat on the bed. Because of the wound on his back, he occasionally frowned. Yi Li asked worriedly, is it very uncomfortable? The doctor will be here soon. Mo Xiaoyao grimaced and said, the doctor will only come to take the arrow. Let Jean do it. He should be more efficient than the other doctors. Yi Li frowned and looked sideways at Jean. Does he know how to take the arrow? This arrow has a hook. If it was a normal arrow, and it did not hit a vital point, he could just pull it out. But an arrow with a hook was very difficult to pull out. If he forcefully pulled it out, a large piece of flesh would be torn off. Jean shook his head with a serious expression. Mo Xiaoyao was helpless. If the arrow pierced through, it would have been much easier. Yi Li looked at him coldly and couldn't help but mock, if it was 2 inches lower, it would have been much easier. Li, are you angry? Mo Xiaoyao sighed and looked at her with a gentle gaze. It was as if the person with an arrow in his back was not him. Yili lowered her head in annoyance. A moment later, she calmed down and said, "Sorry, I am angry at myself." If she had not been careless and underestimated the enemy, if she had not been so lost in her thoughts, Mo Xiaoyao would not have been injured at all. After so many years of living a comfortable life, her vigilance had deteriorated to such a degree. If this had been on the battlefield in the past, it would have been enough for her, Yili, to die 17 or 18 times. Sure enough, the doctor came very quickly because he was dragged over by his collar. This doctor was very brave. After being dragged all the way to the ground, he still had the courage to examine Mo Xiaoyao's wound without a change in expression. After examining the wound, the doctor took the arrow that Yili had brought back and looked at it for a moment. Then he said, "Either this old man uses a knife to cut open the wound and take the arrow out, or poke it in a bit and take it out from the chest. What do you think?" "The back." "Take it out from the front." Yili and Mo Xiaoyao said in unison. They couldn't help but glance at each other. Yili looked away as if nothing had happened and asked, "Doctor, what do you think?" The doctor nodded in satisfaction and said, "Both of you have made a wise choice. Although it seems painful to remove the arrow like this, it will only hurt for a short while. Using a knife to slowly cut open the flesh requires a slow grinding process. Moreover, the healing process will be slow." Yili supported Mo Xiaoyao as she looked at the doctor, who was skillfully preparing, and asked, "Doctor, you seem to be very good at this kind of arrow wound." The doctor replied without raising his head, "This old man used to be a military doctor." So that was the case. She watched as the doctor cleaned the arrowhead's tail, then mercilessly held the arrowhead's tail and pushed it forward. Mo Xiaoyao's body tensed up in an instant, his hand tightly gripping Yili's arm. Yili didn't say a word as she supported him. She watched as the doctor wrapped a sturdy strap around the exposed barbed arrowhead and pulled. A spray of blood flew out. The entire sleeve arrow left Mo Xiaoyao's chest. The doctor took the strong wine from the side and cleaned the wound. Then he skillfully bandaged it with white cloth. Only then did he raise his head and wipe away the sweat on his forehead, saying, "It's fine, it didn't hurt any vital parts or bones. Just change it every day and rest for a while." Yili looked at the blood in the basin next to her, and the pile of bloody gauze on the ground, asking, "What do you need to take?" "Something to replenish the blood." The doctor disdainfully twisted his mouth, saying, "The prince is still young, his body isn't weak. Princess, if you are really worried, you can stew something like 4 substances soup, angelica soup to replenish the blood, or red date soup." Seeing the doctor leave behind a few prescriptions for external use and swagger away with his medicine box, Yili felt a little embarrassed. Why did she feel that the soup that the doctor mentioned was for women? This doctor has a personality. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, saying, "He is the special doctor in our mansion. He used to be a military doctor of the Black Cloud Cavalry." Mo Xiaoyao was injured, so Wen asked them to stay in Wuyue Temple to recuperate. They would return to the capital when they got better. However, Mo Xiaoyao refused, and Yili didn't oppose. Since those killers dared to openly assassinate Mo Xiaoyao near the capital, they definitely wouldn't give up after failing once. Since Wen had made up her mind to stay out of worldly affairs, they would only bring unnecessary danger to her if they stayed here. When the shadow guard sent by the Prince Ding mansion arrived, Mo Xiaoyao left some shadow guard to protect Wen, and returned to the capital with Yili. Prince Ding was seriously injured near the capital, which was naturally not a trivial matter. However, Mo Xiaoyao seemed to have ordered people to block the news. After they returned to the capital, the dignitaries in the capital didn't seem to know that Mo Xiaoyao was injured. Anyway, Mo Xiaoyao didn't need to go to court every day like ordinary people. He just recuperated at home when he had nothing to do. However, there was one thing that made them quite helpless. As soon as they returned to the mansion, Nanny's son directly sent Mo Xiaoyao to Yili's courtyard on the grounds that Prince needed personal care because of his injury. Nanny Lin, Nanny Wei, and director Mo were naturally happy to see this. They excitedly directed the servants to move Mo Xiaoyao's things into the new room. They were so happy that they seemed to forget that their master had just been seriously injured by an assassin. Because everyone in the mansion worked hard together, Yili had to take on the task of changing Mo Xiaoyao's medicine every day. Even though Yili used to be a soldier who had gone through fire and water, she still felt shocked when she saw the scars on Mo Xiaoyao's body. Not only were there knife wounds on his chest and back, but there were also some sword wounds. It was hard to connect this body with Mo Xiaoyao's image of a gentle young master. Yili finally understood what Mo Xiaoyao meant when he said, "I'm fine as long as I don't die." To be able to survive such a serious injury, he must have experienced a narrow escape from death that normal people couldn't imagine. Every time she applied medicine and saw this man smiling calmly at her, Yili couldn't help but feel a faint throbbing pain in her heart. However, she wasn't someone who liked to be conflicted. She quickly attributed this strange feeling to Mo Xiaoyao being injured because of her. She quickly immersed herself in the process of making up for it. Yili rejected Mo Xiaoyao's previous suggestion of hiring a skilled swordsmanship master for her. Instead, apart from handling the mansion's affairs and taking care of Mo Xiaoyao, she spent the rest of her time in the mansion's secret training grounds. It was a very focused training of her strength and speed. At the same time, she also trained in a certain type of internal energy that Mo Xiaoyao recommended. However, Yili knew that internal energy wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. As for the rumors of internal energy being able to split rocks and mountains at its strongest, Yili didn't understand. Why would she want to use her own hands to split rocks and mountains? If she could recover to her peak state, she could break a person's bones with one punch even without internal energy. What made Yili satisfied was that this body's potential wasn't bad. In Mo Xiaoyao's words, this body could be considered a good material for practicing martial arts. Thus, Yili spent most of her time in the training grounds every day. The original training grounds in the mansion had been changed by her quite a bit. Since only she and Mo Xiaoyao used it, Mo Xiaoyao didn't care how she changed it or how she practiced. He would only occasionally go to the training grounds to watch her practice when he had nothing to do. On the other hand, Jin couldn't forget Yili's skills after seeing her fight. Every time he was by Mo Xiaoyao's side, he would stare at Yili and Qing Shuang and Qing Wan who were practicing with Yili. He was just short of begging Wang Fei to take him as a disciple. Chapter 111. Mo Xiaoyao also came from a military background. In the beginning, he didn't see the benefits of Yili's training, but as time passed, he began to see. Seeing Jin looking pitifully at the three figures in the training field, Mo Xiaoyao couldn't help but speak up for him. Yili only smiled when she heard this. "Right now, I'm only doing recovery training. The most important thing is to train my strength, speed, and endurance. There's no secret to it. It's just that Jin doesn't have much time because he's with you every day." The word recovery made Mo Xiaoyao raise his eyebrows slightly. He smiled faintly. "Does Li think that after this kind of training, you can fight against martial arts experts?" Yili shrugged helplessly. She took the handkerchief Mo Xiaoyao handed to her and wiped her sweat. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. The most important thing about my method is that it doesn't take much time and it doesn't have high requirements for one's aptitude and comprehension. Using the Nigong technique you gave me as an example, without considering aptitude and comprehension, even if I trained for 20 hours a day, how long would it take to succeed? Mo Xiaoyao was deep in thought. Yili looked at him with a smile and said, "My training, even though I can't train you to become a martial arts expert, but at most 1 year, I can make a healthy person's body reach its peak. If I focus on the various skills, a martial arts expert only has one life." Mo Xiaoyao understood that there were many people with good bodies, but there weren't many martial arts experts. Therefore, not everyone with good bodies could become an expert. Yili clearly wanted to find another way, bypassing Nigong and martial arts. She wanted to make a person strong. Li's way of thinking is very special. I look forward to Li's results. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Many thanks. Yi Li smiled. She didn't mind revealing some things to Mo Xiaoyao because only Mo Xiaoyao could provide her with what she needed. In the entire Fu, the only two people who were dissatisfied with Yi Li's obsession with martial arts were Mother Lin and Mother Wei. It was clear that the two mamas couldn't understand why the elegant and graceful young miss would like to play with swords and spears after marrying into the Ding King's Fu. They even tried to persuade Yi Li that women should be gentle and quiet and that if she was too strong, the prince wouldn't like her. When the nagging Yi Li heard the two mamas, she wanted to turn around and run. Mo Xiaoyao looked like he was watching a joke and didn't say anything, allowing Yi Li to be bombarded by the two nannies. Prince Wang Fei. Li Wangfu sent an invitation. Chief Steward Mo personally handed over a red and golden dragon and phoenix wedding invitation. Yi Li reached out to take it and raised her eyebrows. Li Wang is welcoming Princess Lingyun as his consort. Chief Steward Mo also knew that the currently Wang Fei was his Wang Fei's blood-related younger sister and explained, Li Wangfu sent an invitation saying that he is marrying Princess Lingyun as his equal consort. These few days, because of Mo Xiaoyao's injury in Yi Li's own matters, she didn't pay attention to things that didn't concern her. Yi Li almost forgot about Princess Lingyun and Princess Xixia's marriage and asked curiously, then, Princess Xixia really entered the palace? Chief Steward Mo reported, Princess Xixia is currently living in Zhaoyang Grand Princess Fu. The Emperor and Empress Dowager's intention seems to be to pick a good day to welcome Princess Xixia into the palace in August. But the title has already been announced. The Emperor has already conferred Princess Xixia as consort Xia. As for Princess Lingyun, because Shitzi Genom of Gojoseon is about to leave for Xiling, the wedding is a bit rushed. What Chief Steward Mo didn't say was that although Princess Lingyun was the equal consort was different from the wife consort. Naturally, she didn't need to spend so much time preparing like the wife consort. When is the wedding banquet? Mo Xiaoyao asked. 3 days later. Mo Xiaoyao nodded, saying, I know. Chief Steward, go prepare a gift for I and Wang Fei. Chief Steward Mo said with some hesitation, Prince means to attend the wedding? The prince had just been assassinated and it was worrying to attend the wedding. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, I can't not go out for such a small matter, right? Go prepare. Yes. Chief Steward Mo quickly responded and left. Not only did he have to prepare Prince Li's gift, but he also had to carefully arrange the guards and shadow guard around the prince and Wang Fei to ensure that nothing went wrong. Seeing Chief Steward Mo leave in a hurry, Yi Li sighed helplessly. She looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, I don't know why, but I feel that the peaceful days are about to disappear. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows, asking, You like peaceful days? Yi Li nodded. It's best to be peaceful, to live a smooth life until old age, and then to die in bed without any regrets. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, then why do you still practice martial arts? Mo Xiaoyao always felt that Yi Li was an extremely contradictory person. Although she appeared to be elegant and refined like a noble lady, but from the very beginning, she gave him an impression that she was different from an ordinary noble lady. Sometimes, she was even more like a general's daughter than Murong Ting. Occasionally, the sharpness that flashed across her brows was not something that an ordinary woman could show. Yi Li sighed, just take it that I like to be vigilant in times of peace. No matter how much she told herself that she wanted to live a peaceful life like a noble lady, but Yi Li was clear in her heart that it was impossible for her to be like Wen Shi and completely hand over her life to others. She could give in to her father's differential treatment, she could give in to all the cumbersome rules that she was not used to, and she could even give in to her own marriage. But she could never give in to Yi Li's nature. She could not let herself become a weak woman who did not know how to rely on others and did not even have the strength to protect herself. There were many things that she had prepared that she might not need in her lifetime, but she would rather put them there for her entire life than to find that she did not have them when she needed them. If Lee doesn't like those trivial matters outside, you don't have to care about them. Mo Xiuyao said, there will be people below to take care of those things. Moreover, Ding King's Fu does not need too much human relations. Yi Li understood. The Ding King's Fu had been quiet for so many years, which was exactly what that person in the palace wanted. These years, the Ding King's Fu's prestige in the Dechu state had been slowly suppressed. If she, the newly appointed Ding King's Fu, was too active now, it would make the emperor afraid. Thinking of this, Yi Li's mind suddenly flashed. She abruptly raised her head to look at Mo Xiuyao and asked, why did Nanzhao and Xiling suddenly form a marriage alliance with the Dechu state? The reason that she had told Princess Lingyun before was just to deceive a child. Xiling and the Dechu state seemed to be destined enemies. It was good enough that the Dechu state did not take advantage of Xiling's calamity to loot the burning house. How could it be solved by a mere princess who was engaged in a political marriage? Mo Xiuyao's eyes flashed slightly, and he said lightly, Nanzhao is just in passing. The one who really wants to form a marriage alliance with the Dechu state is Xiling. Yi Li lowered her eyes. She only felt that the thoughts in her mind were spinning very quickly, and she could not grasp any clues at the moment. After a while, she raised her head to ask, if another war breaks out in the Dechu state, what will happen to the Ding King's Fu? Chapter 112. Mo Xiuyao was startled and a trace of undetectable sorrow flashed past his eyes. After a long time, he said in a low voice, the Ding King's household no longer has anyone who can fight. In less than 5 years, the Ding King's household's 100 years of fame will be annihilated. The common people were always forgetful. Even if the Ding King's household had once protected the Dechu state for hundreds of years, even if the Dechu state was like a god of war in their eyes, once the war broke out again and the Ding King's household was powerless, they would not remember their past glory and would only remember their incompetence. However, the Ding King's household could not blame them because they were not in the wrong. Northern Militant. In the study room, after a long silence, Yi Li's voice faintly sounded. Looking at Mo Xiuyao's expressionless face, she sighed softly. Wasn't it good for everyone to live peacefully in the world? Why did they have to drag the common people into the merciless flames of war for some completely unnecessary reasons? Yi Li felt that she would never be able to understand the thoughts of those in power. Yi Li suddenly felt that this man was very pitiful. He should have been high-spirited and vigorous like his ancestors, pointing out the country and living a carefree life. However, he could only use his youthful appearance to turn the tide when his elder brother suddenly passed away. As early as when he was 18 years old, he had already given up everything he could to protect the Ding King's household's 100 years of fame. After losing his healthy body and handsome appearance, he still had to carefully face the spying and scheming from all sides, as well as the assassination that would come at any time. As intelligent as he was, perhaps he had already seen the future of the Ding King's household. It was just that he was unwilling and could not admit defeat. Can we retreat? Yi Li asked. However, the moment the words left her mouth, she was annoyed at her own childishness. Since ancient times, how many of those who were powerful enough to shake their masters were able to retreat unscathed? Mo Xiuyao lightly said, Mo Xiuyao can retreat. Where can the 800,000 Mahist army and 50,000 Black Cloud cavalry retreat? Yi Li was silent. The people of the Mo family, such as the previous regent Mo Lufang, and even the previous masters of the Mo family would not be more stupid than her. There weren't many masters in the Ding King's residence. Of course, they could just leave. The world was so big, where could they not go? However, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were loyal to the Mo family and the Ding Palace would not leave so easily. When the Dechu state was in trouble, it needed them. When the country was at peace, each of them became a thorn in the emperor's side. Once the master of the Ding King's residence left, the best outcome for them would be to be broken up and suppressed. No one dared to imagine an even worse outcome. Sometimes, in the eyes of an emperor, hundreds of thousands of soldiers might not even be comparable to a chess piece in his hand. If the northern tribes really reignites the flames of war, what do you plan to do? Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her and said calmly, lead the troops into battle. Li Li, I will send you to Yunzhou when the time comes. With Mr. Qingyun here, no one would dare to do anything to you. If it were me, the imperial family would not dare to touch you. Yi Li frowned. She suddenly felt that it was a bit ridiculous. They were originally discussing Mo Jingli's marriage. Why did they suddenly run to this kind of thing? Clearly, there wasn't even a shadow of it. But the faint uneasiness in her heart told her that the conversation just now was not her imagination. Even if her brain was damaged, Mo Xiaoyao would not be damaged with her. Turning her face to ignore Mo Xiaoyao's words, Yi Li nonchalantly changed the topic. Li Wang is going to marry an equal consort. Should I make a trip back to the Yi family? Without needing Yi Li to think, a steward came to report to the Yi family before noon. Old Madam invited Wang Fei to return to the Yi family to discuss something. Returning to the Yi Fu, Yi Li was directly invited into Old Madam Ye's courtyard. The moment she stepped into Rong Le Hall, she saw Yi Li's red and swollen eyes from crying and Wang Shi's angry screams. Old Madam Yi and Minister Yi were also sitting with a gloomy expression. Yi Li curled her lips and understood what was going on. Grandmother, father. Li, Old Madam Yi saw Yi Li come in and her eyes lit up. She hurriedly beckoned for Yi Li to come forward. Yi Li's mouth twitched. She was silent inside. Old Madam didn't think that she could control the emperor's marriage right. She was just a Princess Ding. Don't talk about Li Wang marrying a princess. Even if he wanted to take a concubine, she couldn't control it. Li, you're finally back. Look at your sister. Really has a hard life. Yi Li walked forward and glanced at Yi Ying, who was crying in Wang Shi's arms. She sat down next to Old Madam Yi and asked, Fourth sister, what's wrong? Old Madam Yi said anxiously, was married for less than a month and Li Wang is going to marry an equal concubine. Where will our minister's manor's face go? How will your sister live in the future? Yi Li nodded and said, Our prince also received the invitation from Li Wang Manor just now. At this time, fourth sister isn't in the manor taking care of matters. Why did she come back? Wang Shi glared and said angrily, What did you say? Is already like this and you still blame her for coming home? Yi Li, are you still human? Old master, you see. Shut up. Chapter 113. If fourth sister wants to gain a foothold in the house, I'm afraid you have to start with Xian Zhao, old concubine. Yi Li said softly. What? Yi Ying couldn't help but scream, that old woman has always disliked me, and you want me to flatter her? She has been thinking of ways to torture me. Yi Li frowned and interrupted her. Xian Zhao, old concubine, is Li Wang's aunt and the Empress Dowager's younger sister. You don't want to flatter her, but there are many people who think so. Moreover, I'm not asking you to flatter her. You just have to let her not find fault with you. It's best if you can make her feel that you are a satisfactory concubine. Xian Zhao, old concubine, had been in the palace for decades. How could it be so easy to flatter her? She was afraid that when the time came, she would end up like a dog instead of a tiger. Yi Ying said bitterly, Since we got married, she has been finding fault with me. As long as I do something wrong, it's not right. How can I make her satisfied? If she finds fault with you, you just have to endure it. When you have time, you should ask grandmother how to be a good wife. You are Zhaoyi's younger sister, the daughter of the minister's manor. You have the title of Di Wangfei. You have far more advantages than Princess Ling Yun, a princess from another country who married into the empire. If you can't do it, then just pack up and go back to the minister's manor. Father and Madam don't mind supporting you for a lifetime. You. Yi Ying suddenly forgot her grievances and distress. Her small face was red with anger. She stared at Yi Li with a pair of watery eyes. She sneered and said sarcastically, "That's right. If you can't endure it, you would have run back to the minister's manor crying. No. If you were not married, I would just hang myself with a rope." Yi Li was too lazy to be angry with her. She calmly put down the teacup in her hand and glanced at her. "If you have the time to be angry with me, it's better to go back and do what you should do." Yi Ying still wanted to talk back, but old Madam Yi slapped the table and said, Enough. Learn from your third sister. Look at what you have become." Yi Ying was stunned. She couldn't help but cry when she thought of her own situation. She wiped her tears and said, "What have I become? Who caused me to be like this? Right now, who knows how many people in the capital are secretly laughing at me? Woo-woo. How can Prince treat me like this? What did I do wrong?" Old Madam Ye's head started to hurt because of her crying. She said irritably, "Enough, what's the use of crying? You only know how to cry all day long. You're already married. Do you still think that you have your temper when you're at home? Men, send someone to invite Prince Li to bring forth young Miss back." "Grandmother." Yi Li stopped her and said, "Fourth sister, since you're back, there's no harm in staying a little longer. Prince Li would probably come personally to pick her up. If we send someone to invite Prince Li now, we will be at a disadvantage." Minister Yi looked at Yi Li with appreciation and said, "Mother, Li is right." Old Madam Yi pressed her forehead and sighed, "I'm going to be confused by her anger." "Old Madam, Master, Madam, Prince Li is here," the steward outside the door reported. Although old Madam Yi and Minister Ye's faces were still gloomy, Yi Li could see a trace of joy in their eyes. It seemed that Mo Jingli coming personally to pick up Yi Ying made the two of them very satisfied. After all, their daughter was already married. No matter how angry the Yi family was, it was impossible for them to let Yi Ying move back to the Yi residence and let the Yi family support her for the rest of her life, as Yi Li said. Not long after, Mo Jingli came in. His face was still cold and gloomy as usual. In fact, Yi Li almost couldn't remember seeing Mo Jingli's face in a good mood. It seemed that he always looked like someone owed him a few hundred taels and didn't want to pay him back. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Yi Li. Mo Jingli paused for a moment before turning his gaze to Yi Ying. Yi Ying bit the corner of her lips, feeling wronged. She snorted and turned her head to ignore him. Minister Yi and old Madam Ye's expressions were also indifferent. They didn't have their usual attentiveness and thoughtfulness. Wang Shi's face was even more gloomy. If old Madam Yi didn't secretly glare at her, she would have questioned him directly. Seeing this, Mo Jingli's eyes darkened. Obviously, he wasn't in a good mood. In fact, regarding this marriage, Mo Jingli felt even more wronged than Yi Ying. It wasn't that he wanted to marry that Princess Lingyun. Why would he marry someone who was defeated by Yi Li? Brother Emperor didn't want that woman, so he didn't even ask and just gave her to him. After returning home, Yi Ying kept making trouble with him. Princess Lingyun, that ungrateful woman, even dared to make a scene in the embassy and refused to marry him. Who did she think he was? Did she think that he would only marry her? After being annoyed by Yi Ying and Princess Lingyun, Mo Jingli directly went to the palace to tell Brother Emperor that he wanted to break off the marriage and not marry Princess Lingyun. However, he was reprimanded and chased out by Brother Emperor. Then, he was reprimanded by Mother Empress and Mother Consort. The more he thought about it, the worse Mo Jingli's face became. Minister Yi saw that something was wrong and stopped while he was ahead. He coughed softly and said, Prince is here to take you back. Sit down and talk to Prince. Yi Ying turned around with red eyes and looked at Mo Jingli pitifully. Prince, her resentful voice made Yili tremble uncontrollably. She watched Mo Jingli walk over and hold Yi Ying in his arms. He whispered, "Let's go back to the mansion with I." Prince. Ying is so sad. Woo woo. Yi Ying sobbed and fell into Mo Jingli's arms and cried. Mo Jingli held Yi Ying's waist and silently listened to Yi Ying's grievances. Although he didn't say anything, his face obviously improved a lot. Let's go back. Mo Jingli carried Yi Ying horizontally and nodded to Minister Yi and old Madam Yi. He directly ignored Yi Li and turned around to walk out. However, Yi Li was left with a lot of questions. In fact, until now, she still didn't understand whether he really cared about Yi Ying or not and how much he cared about her. Probably, it wasn't easy to guess the thoughts of someone with facial paralysis, even if Mo Jingli was a slightly deformed facial paralysis. Yi Li leaned on the chair and supported her chin as she thought silently. After declining old Madam Yi and Minister Ye's invitation to stay, Yi Li brought people out of the minister's manor. Seeing that it was still early, Yi Li remembered that since she married into the Ding King's manor, she didn't seem to have gone out alone. Just then, she remembered Nurse Sun's various hints. Mo Xiaoyao's birthday was in a few days. Yi Li decided to see if there were any suitable gifts. After making up her mind, she brought Qing Wan and Qing Shuang to the busiest street in the capital. Walking along the bustling street, Yi Li couldn't help but feel a little distressed when she couldn't find anything suitable after browsing through several shops. She didn't know what kind of gift was suitable. Qing Shuang looked at Yi Li's distressed appearance and boldly asked, "Princess consort, do you want to buy something?" Yi Li looked at the two curious maidservants with sparkling eyes. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Nurse Sun said that in a few days, it will be Mo Xiaoyao's birthday. I want to find a gift for him." Qing Shuang rolled her eyes at her, "Miss. Do you need to run to the streets to find a gift for Prince?" Yi Li was at a loss. "You mean to give a ready-made gift? Wouldn't it seem insincere?" Moreover, there were a lot of treasures in her room, but other than calligraphy and paintings, most of them were women's jewelry. Did she really have to pick a calligraphy and painting for him? Chapter 114. Qing Wan pursed her lips and snickered. She blinked and whispered, "Prince doesn't lack any treasures. If Princess wants to show sincerity, why don't you make a gift yourself? Even a purse is more valuable than an antique in Prince's eyes." "Purse?" Qing Shuang waved her hand. "How can a purse do? How about Wang Fei make some clothes for Wang Ye?" "Make clothes?" Yi Li looked down at her hands. She didn't seem to touch a needle and thread since she married into the king's mansion. But, this seemed to be a good idea. Princess Ding. After making up her mind, Yi Li was ready to turn back to the king's mansion, but she was blocked by a voice from behind. Yi Li looked back and saw the pair of cousins standing in the crowd. She just wanted to say, "Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road." "Shitzi, Princess." Yi Li nodded slightly. Lei Tengfeng didn't seem to see Yi Li's indifferent and alienated look. He walked forward and smiled. "What a coincidence. Princess Ding is shopping alone." Yi Li smiled. "Qing Wan, Qing Shuang greets Shitzi and Princess." Did Shitzi Genom of Gojoseon's eyes go out of their sockets? Didn't he see that there were two living people standing beside her? Lei Tengfeng's eyes twitched, and he smiled. "I'm going back to West Hill in a few days, so I want to buy something for Ling Yun. I don't know if Princess can help me." Yi Li looked at the enthusiastic and indifferent siblings with a fake smile and said, "I'm afraid I can't help much." "How can that be? Princess is proficient in both the pen and the sword. She is also the champion of 100 Flowers this year. Her vision must be good." Lei Tengfeng smiled. Yi Li couldn't refuse anymore. She could only say, "In that case, Shitzi and Princess, please." Princess Lingyun glanced at Yi Li. Her face was haggard, and she looked dispirited. It seemed that ever since the betrothal, her life hadn't been too good. She just didn't know what method Lei Tengfeng used to make Princess Lingyun listen to him obediently. The three of them walked on the streets with their attendants. Princess Lingyun was completely absent-minded. Even when walking, she had to be supported by her maidservant from time to time so that she would not bump into the passing crowd. Yi Li saw that the previously arrogant and domineering young lady had become like a withered bean sprout in just a few days. While Princess Lingyun was being ordered by Lei Tengfeng to try on clothes, Yi Li asked, "Princess Lingyun doesn't look too good." Lei Tengfeng raised an eyebrow and looked at Yi Li with interest. He said, "Is Princess Consort sympathizing with Lingyun?" Yi Li glanced at him. "Shitzi, as her cousin, doesn't sympathize with her. Is it my turn as an outsider to meddle in other people's business?" Lei Tengfeng smiled unconcernedly and said, "It's nothing. A child is throwing a tantrum and going on a hunger strike." "A child throwing a tantrum and going on a hunger strike?" Yi Li nodded. "I hope the princess won't collapse on the wedding day." Lei Tengfeng was full of confidence. Or rather, he didn't care at all. He smiled and said, "Princess Consort, don't worry. Our Shilin will not allow such a disrespectful thing to happen. On the day of the wedding, Lingyun will be glowing as a bride." Yi Li turned her head to look at the decorations in the shop. She didn't have any good feelings towards people like Lei Tengfeng. She didn't believe that Lei Tengfeng didn't know what kind of ending Princess Lingyun would face if she stayed in the Dechu state to marry Mo Jingli. He just didn't care. A person who could push his cousin to a dead end with a smile and say that he was doing it for her own good. In reality, this kind of person was colder and more heartless than Mo Jingli. Lei Tengfeng saw the alienation in Yi Li's expression. He looked at Yi Li with a smile and said, "Princess Ding seems to have something against me." Yi Li glanced coolly at him and said, "No, I never have anything against strangers." "Stranger?" Lei Tengfeng smiled meaningfully. "How can it be a stranger? Speaking of which, did Prince Ding and Wang Fei like my wedding gift?" Yi Li said, "The cloud-grasping sword is of great significance to the Ding Wang Fu. How could they not like it?" "I've troubled Shitzi." No. Lei Tengfeng shook his head and said with a smile, "The cloud-grasping sword is a gift for Wang Fei. Prince Ding and Wang Fei's gift was sent to the Ding Wang Fu the day after the wedding. Did Wang Fei not receive it?" Yi Li stilled and her brows furrowed. She stared coldly at Lei Tengfeng and said, "Shitzi has good methods. How many people want such a famous painting, but Shitzi can easily give it away." Lei Tengfeng smiled and said, "I'm a rough person. Famous paintings need to be appreciated by refined scholars, right? It seems Prince Ding and Wang Fei are both very satisfied." Yi Li stared at him. Ho Er smiled faintly, "Shitzi has spent so much effort, how can Prince Ding and I not be satisfied? Speaking of which, Han Mingyue's Chu Jing beauty has long disappeared. To be able to see the former #1 beauty of the capital, Yi Li is very fortunate." "Interesting." Lei Tengfeng praised and looked at Yi Li with a smile that wasn't a smile. He said, "Wang Fei, I don't believe that Wang Fei doesn't know that the woman in the painting is Prince Ding's fiancée." Yi Li looked at him, "So, Shitzi gave that painting to make Yi Li feel ashamed?" "I wouldn't dare." Lei Tengfeng smiled and said, "Wang Fei is talented and beautiful. Tengfeng admires you very much. How would I dare to have such thoughts? But Wang Fei should admit that sometimes, what you can't get is the best. Isn't that right?" Yi Li raised an eyebrow and said, "There are many things you can't get in this world. Shitzi shouldn't have such thoughts." Lei Tengfeng giggled and said, "Why shouldn't I? This Shitzi feels that as long as you want something, you should use all means to firmly grasp it. Otherwise, wouldn't it be regretful if someone else took advantage of it?" Yi Li lowered her eyes and calmly drank tea. "The princess is about to come out. Is Shitzi sure you want to chat with Ben Fei here?" Lei Tengfeng stilled and said with a helpless smile, Wang Fei really is a straightforward person. Tengfeng can't. Yili raised an eyebrow and looked at him silently. Lei Tengfeng smiled and said, it's not a big matter. Someone wants this one to pass a message to Wang Fei. In addition, I also have a question that I would like to ask the princess. I'm all ears. Someone wants me to tell Wang Fei, other people's things will always belong to other people. Lei Tengfeng looked at Yili and smiled. Yili didn't change her expression. This sentence, does it have anything to do with Shizi's congratulatory gift? Lei Tengfeng shrugged and said, I don't know. This one is only responsible for passing the message. Also, doesn't Wang Fei want to hear what this one wants to ask? Shizi, please speak. This one just said, this one admires Wang Fei very much. I don't know, if Wang Fei is interested in traveling to Xiling. Yi Li's eyes darkened. Was she being teased? Or did Lei Tengfeng feel that it was a very satisfying thing to kidnap Prince Ding's wife and elope? After looking at Lei Tengfeng for a long time, Yi Li faintly sighed and said, Shizi, this consort has the intention of traveling to Xiling, but I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? Lei Tengfeng's eyes were deep and unfathomable. I'm afraid, this consort will die at Shizi's hands before stepping into Xiling's borders. Yi Li coldly laughed and faintly finished the latter part of her sentence. Lei Tengfeng's expression instantly froze, as if he couldn't think of what expression to put on for a moment. He could only stiffen his face and laugh dryly. What are you saying, Wang Fei? This one is sincerely inviting you. Yi Li stood up and smiled. Since it's like this, if there is a chance in the future, this consort will definitely go with our prince to Xiling to visit Shizi. Today, I won't disturb Shizi and princess's time together. Goodbye. Chapter 115. Ignoring the expression of Lei Tengfeng sitting there, Yi Li stood and walked out. In the inner hall, Lei Tengfeng, who had been left behind, stroked his chin as he looked thoughtfully at the bead curtain swaying because someone had left. The smile on his face was even more arrogant and ambitious than before. An interesting woman, no wonder Mo Xiuyao would marry her. In the inner hall, Lei Tengfeng, who had been left behind, stroked his chin as he looked thoughtfully at the bead curtain swaying because someone had left. The smile on his face was even more arrogant and ambitious than before. An interesting woman, no wonder Mo Xiuyao would marry her. Princess Lingyun walked out from inside, still wearing the same clothes as when she had gone in. She stood by the door and looked resentfully at Lei Tengfeng. Lei Tengfeng raised an eyebrow and lowered his eyes to hide the disdain in them as he said, Lingyun, don't think about it. Imperial brother is doing this for your own good. Compared to that Li Wangfei who doesn't have a brain, this Princess Ding is very hard to deal with. Even if you enter Princess Ding, you will not be able to beat her. Haven't you suffered enough that day? You know very well that even without Yi Li, you would not be able to enter the Prince Ding mansion. Princess Lingyun stared at him and said, you are speaking up for Yi Li. Lei Tengfeng snorted and said, pretend I didn't say anything. If you think you have the ability to provoke Yi Li, then go ahead. Let's see if she dares to shoot through your head next time. I don't care what you want to do. In 3 days, obediently get on the sedan chair and marry into the Li Wangfu. Don't force me to drug you. I am a princess, you dare. I thought that you knew your use when you made a fuss about coming to Dongchu. Lei Tengfeng looked mockingly at her. You didn't think that just because you came to Dongchu to choose a bridegroom, you could marry whoever you liked? No matter how favored a princess was, she was still just a princess. A princess who was married to him, actually dared to put on airs in front of him? West Hill Embassy. After sending Princess Lingyun back to her room, Lei Tengfeng turned around and returned to his own room. As soon as he closed the door, Lei Tengfeng's eyes darkened. His gaze shot to a certain spot in the room like a knife. The completely enclosed room was dark and unpredictable because there was no light. A slim figure in black sat beside a round sandalwood table. Lei Tengfeng's expression darkened as he stared at the back of the woman in black and asked, what are you doing here? The woman in black turned her face to the side, revealing a pair of moving starry eyes in the dim light. However, her eyes, which should have been as clear as water, were filled with obvious anger. Why did you ruin my plans? Lei Tengfeng snorted and sneered, spoil your plans? What has this prince done to ruin your plans? Ling Yun's matters. The woman in black gritted her teeth and said, if it wasn't for your interference, how could Ling Yun have married into the Li Palace? Lei Tengfeng relaxed his body a bit. He walked to a chair on the side and sat down as he said, you still have the nerve to say that. If it wasn't for you talking to Ling Yun all day long, how could Ling Yun have married the Li Palace? Their original plan was not to marry a princess to a brainless prince. It was a pity that after Ling Yun's interference, the emperor would not want her no matter what. The woman in black snorted and said, if Ling Yun had entered the Prince Ding mansion, wouldn't it have been better? Stop dreaming. Ling Yun has been fooled by you. Could it be that you also killed her? Lei Tengfeng said with disdain, do you think that Mo Xiaoyao is some kind of soft-hearted person? If Ling Yun enters the Prince Ding mansion, we will have to collect her corpse in less than a month. Even if she doesn't die, do you think that with Ling Yun's brain, she won't be tricked by Mo Xiaoyao and turn against him? As if she was angered by Lei Tengfeng's mocking tone, the woman angrily said, isn't the reason I'm doing this to help you? Lei Tengfeng sneered. His face clearly showed that he did not believe her. Help me? Help me? Why didn't you have Royun come? Aren't you certain that with Ling Yun's personality, Mo Xiaoyao would never fall in love with her? What a pity. This prince feels that Mo Xiaoyao might fall in love with Yi Li. Impossible. The woman angrily shouted. She quickly realized that she had lost her composure. The black-clothed woman let out a breath and said with a smile, don't try to trick me. Mo Xiaoyao's eyes are above his head. How could he fall in love with a woman as good as Yi Li? Good for nothing. Lei Tengfeng muttered. He carelessly swept his eyes over the black-clothed woman before saying, Mo Xiaoyao's eyes are above his head? That's not necessarily true. Enough. I'm not here to argue with you. Lei Tengfeng lazily looked at her and said, then you can just tell me why you came to my room at this time. I want to stay in Dechu State for a period of time, the black-clothed woman said. That's fine. Just don't come back to Xiling in the future. Lei Tengfeng waved his hand and nonchalantly indicated that she could leave. You. The black-clothed woman angrily glared at him. She couldn't say anything for a while. Lei Tengfeng coldly smiled and said, you think I don't know what you want to do in Dongchu? It's rare to see a woman as greedy as you. However, you should be careful. Don't end up with nothing. The black-clothed woman hatefully bit her red lips under the veil. Lei Tengfeng, you won't be happy if you don't mock and ridicule me? Lei Tengfeng coldly snorted. He looked at the woman in front of him with an icy gaze that faintly revealed a trace of hatred. You can't live if you don't go around seducing men. Don't be delusional. Mo Xiaoyao won't want you. Do you know where the painting you had people send over went? Lei Tengfeng looked at her. Suddenly, a malicious smile appeared on his face. The black-clothed woman vigilantly stared at him. Lei Tengfeng looked at her with interest. Seeing her eyes gradually become flustered under his gaze, he smiled and said, Mo Xiaoyao sent it to Suzhi that day. No matter how beautiful Su Zuodi is, she's just a dead person to Mo Xiaoyao. What do you think you can do? Do you want to make a bet? I feel that Mo Xiaoyao will definitely fall in love with Yi Li if possible. The black-clothed woman's anger almost wanted to burn Lei Tengfeng to ashes. This time, she took even longer to calm down. She smiled sweetly at Lei Tengfeng and said, then what about you? Xiling country's Genom of Gojoseon, why are you so interested in Yi Li? Lei Tengfeng's eyes flashed. He quickly smiled and said, because she's Mo Xiaoyao's woman. From this point of view, her value is obviously much higher than yours. The black-clothed woman's eyes moved. She softly smiled and said, then. Don't you want Emo Shioyao's woman? Ha! Think about it. If the whole world knew that Emo Shioyao's wife ran away with another man, how interesting would that be? Lei Tengfeng frowned. He stared at the black-clothed woman in disgust and said, knowing Emo Shioyao is probably the most unlucky thing in his life. If I want to defeat Emo Shioyao, I will defeat him fair and square. There's no need to use such a method. Ha, how could that be? Meeting me should be the happiest thing in his life. Of course, I also think so. The black-clothed woman said softly. Her enchanting eyes revealed traces of nostalgia. Also, Emo Shioyao is already crippled. He will never go onto the battlefield again in this life. From another point of view, he will never be defeated. You actually still think that you can defeat him fair and square? The undefeated legend of the Ding Palace for hundreds of years. Chapter 116. That's enough. Get out. We'll return to Xiling in 3 days. You can try to stay in Eastern Chu. According to what I know, Han Mingyue has already returned to Jiangnan. You can see if Emo Shioyao will be merciful to you. Lei Tengfeng's face darkened as he spoke coldly. The black-clothed woman stood up and looked at him with grievance. I know why you treat me so badly. You're jealous, aren't you? Or do you think I don't look good wearing a veil? As she spoke, the woman raised her hand to take off the veil on her face. Lei Tengfeng suddenly picked up the teacup on the table and threw it at her. Get out. You, humph. After being reprimanded so rudely, the black-clothed woman put down her hand and glared at the man in the chair before leaving in a huff. Yili returned to the Prince Ding mansion. Emo Shioyao was reading in his room. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he raised his head to look at her. You're back. Did something happen to old Madame Yi? Yili waved her hand and said uninterestedly, what could happen at this time? Fourth sister went home to cry and make a fuss. Grandmother wanted me to go back and say a few words. She's never been easy to deal with, so how could she listen to me? But on the street, I met the heir of Xiling and Princess Lingyun. Emo Shioyao looked at her and raised his eyebrows. Yili thought about it and decided there wasn't much to talk about. She turned around and went in to change into some light clothes. When she came out, she saw Emo Shioyao was still sitting in the room with his head lowered, reading. She called Qing Xia and the others to bring out some plain-colored cloth. Qing Shuang had always been clever. Not long after Yili gave the order, she had already brought the cloth over with a smile before she had even sat down. They were all light colors like the moon white, light green, and beige. She also thoughtfully brought over all kinds of utensils. Yili took the cloth and looked at the man in front of her. Her faint brows furrowed together. Emo Shioyao raised his head to look at her conflicted appearance. He smiled faintly. What's wrong? Not satisfied with the clothes made in the residence. She heard that there were 2 embroidery workshops in the capital that sold pretty good stuff. She would ask them to send some over to take a look. You don't have to be so troubled. Yili was speechless. If I bought clothes for you from outside, wouldn't Mother Lin and wet nurse nag me to death? She then looked at her own clothes. Was she that picky? Gritting her teeth, Yili said, lend me one of your old clothes. Emo Shioyao raised his eyebrows and looked at Yili, who was trying her best to remain expressionless. Slowly, her gaze shifted to the cloth on the table. Her eyes moved slightly as she looked at Yili and said with a smile, go get it yourself. Ever since he was sent to this courtyard to recuperate, Chief Steward Emo had ordered people to move all the clothes in his room here. However, his new wife seemed to have a good habit of not touching other people's things, even if the other person was her husband. So even though their things were placed together, in reality, they were placed separately. No one would touch the other's things. Yili snorted softly. She stood and walked into the room. But after walking a few steps, she suddenly stopped. Turning back, she took the measuring tape from the needle and thread box and walked in. Mo Xiuyao stared at the simple and elegant cloth on the table in a daze for a while. Then he suddenly smiled faintly. Her eyes, which were originally a little cold, now had some real warmth. Either you didn't do something at all, or you did it as quickly as possible. So Yili's daily life had an extra task of needlework. The two old mamas were comforted by this. Seeing their young miss play with knives and swords every day after getting married, the two mamas were very anxious. Even though the prince didn't say anything, but how could a Wang Fei play with knives and swords every day? Other than San Yi, the Su family hadn't had a martial artist in hundreds of years. It definitely was San Yi who taught young miss bad things. The two mamas who didn't know the truth silently blamed Su Qingfeng, who was about to enter the army. Their Wang Fei was making clothes for the prince for the first time. This attracted the attention of the mamas and the servant girls. When they started to eat, Yili found something very depressing. She didn't know how to make clothes for men. When her mother was still alive, she wasn't old enough to learn how to make clothes. After her mother passed away, there was no one to teach her, and there was no need for her to do so, so she had forgotten about it. In the end, she could only helplessly let Lin Mama teach her how to make clothes. After making the clothes, the servant girls surrounded Yili to discuss what pattern to use, what color of embroidery thread to use, and what kind of pouch to match it with. Everyone was talking at once and arguing non-stop. Pianpi and Mo Xiuyao didn't know what had happened, but his reading location had changed from the study to their room. Even though they were in the outer room, Yili, who was surrounded by the servant girls in the room, felt that Mo Xiuyao could hear what they were muttering about. She couldn't help but feel angry and annoyed. She wanted to slap these talkative servant girls until they fainted. Wang Fei. Seeing Yili pick up the cloud pattern and prepare to make the thread, Qing Shuang shouted disapprovingly. She looked like she wanted to come forward and destroy the pattern in her hands. Yili raised an eyebrow at her. Qing Shuang said, "Wang Fei, you're giving this to someone. How can you take out a pattern that is too normal?" The veins on Yili's forehead jumped. It was just making clothes, wouldn't this girl have too many opinions? Qing Shuang ignored Yili's dissatisfied expression and quickly put a stack of patterns in front of Yili. There were all kinds of dragon patterns, eagle patterns, tiger patterns, and complicated patterns of flowers and plants, auspicious patterns, etc. Qing Shuang looked at Yili's dark expression and hurriedly took out one of the patterns. She said in a small voice. Qing Shuang asked for Wang Fei. The prince likes this one. Glaring at the image of an eagle in the sky, she wanted to poke Qing Shuang with a needle. Qing Shuang saw her young miss's unfriendly expression and hurriedly made a begging expression before running out. Yili stared dazedly at the patterns on the table. She suddenly sighed and took the embroidery basket to the side to make the thread. Qing Xia served from the side and said, "Qing Shuang is a naughty girl, but she's thinking for Wang Fei. It's best if Wang Fei isn't angry at her." Yili looked up at her and said helplessly, "This girl is usually spoiled. She's always mischievous." Qing Yu pursed her lips and snickered. Qing Shuang is really energetic. Why don't Wang Fei punish her to do embroidery? Qing Xia covered her mouth and snickered. Qing Yu's punishment is too harsh. But if Wang Fei can calm down, Qing Shuang will be happy to accept the punishment. Qing Shuang had a jumpy temper. She had always been impatient with needlework. Usually, it was as if she wanted her life to finish embroidering a handkerchief. Yili's eyes turned, and there was a smile on her face. "Very good. Tell Qing Shuang to embroider a winter plum for me. It must be done in half a month. Otherwise, let her do as she sees fit." Qing Wan and others blinked and smiled. They secretly mourned for Qing Shuang in their hearts. You know that Wang Fei is shy, but you still ran to ask the prince. Isn't this sending yourself to be punished by Wang Fei? What does Li want to embroider? Mo Xiuyao's voice came from outside. Everyone quickly turned and bowed. Prince. Mo Xiuyao looked at the three girls who were full of smiles and said, leave. Chapter 117. The three bowed and retreated, leaving some space for the prince and Wang Fei. Seeing Mo Xiuyao come over, Yili looked with some embarrassment at the things in her hands and said, is Prince so idle? He's wandering around the room all day. Mo Xiuyao smiled slightly and said, he doesn't need to go to court and doesn't have anything to do. Naturally, he is idle. Li has been very busy these days. Yili rolled her eyes at him in exasperation. Did he not see what she was busy with? The wheelchair stopped next to Yili. Mo Xiuyao said with a light laugh, Li, don't be embarrassed. Even if your embroidery is not good, I will not laugh at you. Very good. Yili angrily poked a needle on her clothing. He dared to say that her embroidery was not good. Even second aunt praised her embroidery. Tilting her head to look at Mo Xiuyao, Yili had a fake smile on her face. No, my embroidery is not good. I don't dare to stain Prince's eyes. Get someone from the sewing room to sit so I don't have to worry. Mo Xiuyao smiled helplessly. I mean that no matter what Lili embroidery looks like, it is the best in Ai's eyes. Yili snorted and ignored him. She turned around and went back to work. Mo Xiuyao sat silently at the side and looked at Yili's gradually focused expression. A warm smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Because the Li Palace had lost face during the previous wedding, the virtuous imperial concubine was probably trying her best to regain her face this time. The ceremony of marrying an equal consort was as grand as marrying a deconsort. But due to Princess Lingyun's status as a princess of a country, outsiders could not find fault with it. This made Yi Ying's already ugly face even more gloomy. On the day of the wedding, Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao beat Li Wang Fei together. Mo Jingli personally stood at the door to welcome them. Yi Li habitually found that Mo Jingli still had a stiff face. There was no joy on his face. If it wasn't for his new red wedding robes, if it wasn't for his good looks, the guests passing by would have wondered if they should turn back home and change into black and white to attend the wedding. Now, Yi Li really sympathized with Yi Ying. Mo Jingli wasn't cold by nature, he was just used to pretending. If any man dared to show such a half-dead expression at her wedding, she would kick him to death no matter if it was her previous life or this life. Indicating that Mo Jingli did not need to care about them, Mo Xiuyao and Yili entered the Li Wang Fu with the steward of the Fu. Mo Jingli did not have the time to care about them. Maybe it was to get back the face she had lost last time. Virtuous consort Zhao not only made the wedding extravagant, she even invited the Empress Dowager to personally host her son's wedding. To be able to flatter the Empress Dowager, it was naturally a great opportunity to curry favor. Therefore, as long as the officials were in Jing City, regardless of whether they had received the invitation or not, they would think of ways to come and congratulate them. The Li Wang Fu was filled with guests and was as busy as a marketplace. What is it? What is Li thinking about? Seeing Yi Li's strange and conflicted expression, Mo Xiuyao asked with a smile. Yi Li shook her head and said with a smile, nothing, I'm just curious. Does Li Wang have the same expression all year round? Isn't today a day of great joy? If it was anyone else, they might have thought that she was dissatisfied with the marriage bestowed by the emperor. Mo Xiuyao turned his head to look at Mo Xiuyao at the door and said with a smile, Jingli has never liked to smile since he was young. Those who are familiar with him are used to it. Yi Li didn't really care about this issue. The wedding hadn't started yet, so the male guests and female guests were arranged separately. When they entered the residence, the stewards came forward to invite Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li to their respective places. The steward of the Li Wang Fu led Yi Li into the inner Fu. The female guests that had come to attend the wedding were all gathered in the garden of the Li Wang Fu. They were resting and chatting in the small pavilions in the garden. Passing through the garden where the noblewomen gathered in twos and threes, Yi Li was led to an elegant small pavilion on the east side of the garden. Inside, there were some women of high status or older. Virtuous concubine Zhao brought Yi Ying to accompany them personally. Seeing Yi Ying's bitter expression and the dissatisfaction between the brows of the virtuous consort, Yi Li sighed in her heart. Yi Ying and Yi Yu were both women of Wang Shi. They were both beautiful. How could they be so different? It seemed that old Madame Yi and Minister Ye's decision was right. Even if Yi Ying's appearance was better than Yi Yu's, with her personality, she would have been torn to pieces if she was sent to the palace. Greetings to old consort. Yi Li went forward to greet the old consort. The virtuous consort was about to get up to greet her. Yi Li certainly would not let her get up. Without waiting for her to speak, she said with a smile, "So many people have arrived, but I am the latest. Old consort, please don't blame me." The virtuous consort moved her body and sat down firmly. She smiled proudly, "Not at all. Princess Ding coming to our Li Palace brings light to our humble dwelling. I wonder if Prince Ding..." Yi Li said with a smile, "Prince Ding is also here. He went outside first and will come to greet old consort later." The virtuous consort praised Yi Li with a face full of smiles. Of course, the two people involved did not take these praises seriously. Although the virtuous consort was not young, she was of the same generation as Mo Xiuyao. She never expected the Prince of Ding to come and greet her in person. After exchanging greetings, Yi Li glanced at the people sitting in the pavilion. Almost all of them were acquaintances. However, Zhao Yang Grand Princess, Zhao Ren Grand Princess, and old Madame Hua had not arrived yet. The southern marquise sitting in front stood up and gave Yi Li her seat. Yi Li thanked her with a smile. The southern marquise was the mother-in-law of the eldest daughter of the Yi family, Yi Zhen. Yi Li had a good impression of this eldest sister's husband. She smiled and chatted with the southern marquise. As she listened to the noblewomen casually talk about the gossip in the capital, Yi Li occasionally added a few words. Yi Li was puzzled to find that Yi Ying, who was sitting next to the virtuous consort, was almost completely silent. Sitting there all alone, she looked more like a beautiful puppet. Because of today, Yi Ying's dress was different from her usual elegant and refined appearance. She wore a bright red princess dress with gold peonies entwined around it. It made her look even more unnatural. It made people feel inexplicably uncomfortable just by looking at her. It had to be said that Yi Ying had been spoiled by Wang Shi to the point that she did not look like a legitimate daughter of a noble family at all. Wang Shi had spent all of Yi Ying's intelligence and time on learning the 4 arts of music, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, singing, and dancing. In fact, there were many noble ladies who did not know these things at all, or only picked 1 or 2 to learn. They had a good enough family background and did not have to worry about not being able to marry into a good family. It was better to have the reputation of being a talented girl. However, between the reputation of being a talented girl and the means of being in power, anyone would choose the latter. Speaking of which, Princess Ding and Ying haven't had a good talk in a long time. It's not good for us old women to have the princess consort sit here with them. Ying, accompany Princess Ding for a walk. The virtuous consort sensed Yi Li's gaze on Yi Ying and did not make things difficult for her. She directly ordered Yi Ying. Yi Ying looked at Yi Li and pursed her lips as she stood up. Yi Li stood up and smiled at the virtuous consort. "Since that's the case, thank you for your consideration. Everyone, Yi Li will leave first." Chapter 118. Watching the two sisters leave, Nan Marquis Furin smiled, "Speaking of which, this Princess Ding speaks in a gentle manner and has good manners. If she was a daughter of an ordinary family, who knows how aggrieved she would be." No wonder old Madame Hua praised Princess Ding so much. Everyone agreed. They all had daughters. If Princess Ding did not marry, who knew if it would be their daughter's turn to marry into the Ding King's residence? The Ding King's residence had a high status, but Prince Ding did not have any power in the court. Furthermore, he was a disabled person who could not walk. If their daughter, who they had painstakingly raised, were to marry into his residence, wouldn't their hearts ache? Therefore, towards Yi Li, who married into the Ding King's residence first, it was inevitable that they would feel sympathy and pity for her. Looking at this girl, she was only 15 or 16 years old. To be able to have such a calm and composed temperament after marrying such a husband, she was indeed not bad. On the contrary, Princess Consort Li, who was once envied by all the noble ladies in the capital, was a little disdainful. Wasn't she the #1 beauty who was proficient in the 4 arts? She did not even know when to advance or retreat when interacting with others. No one knew what Prince Li saw in her. She did not seem like she came from the same residence as Princess Ding. Of course, everyone only kept this evaluation in their hearts and would never say it in front of the virtuous consort Zhao. Yi Li brought Yi Ying to walk in the garden. Although Yi Li tried her best to choose a remote place to walk, the two of them had different statuses and attracted a lot of attention. Fortunately, everyone knew their limits. They understood that Princess Ding and Princess Consort Li wanted to reminisce about the past and did not come forward to disturb them. Yi Li glanced at Yi Ying's aggrieved and resentful look and frowned. She asked helplessly, "What's the matter with you? Mo Jingli has not married Consort Ping yet. Who are you trying to show your resentful face to?" Yi Ying glared at her with resentment and said faintly, "Do you think Prince truly loves me?" Yi Li rolled her eyes in her heart. "If he truly loved you, there wouldn't be this scene, all right? Back then, he clearly said that he only liked me and would only treat me well." Yi Li tried her best not to let her numb face become distorted. Her heart twitched when she imagined Mo Jingli's expressionless face expressing his feelings to Yi Ying. "Young lady, how good must your eyesight be in order to make yourself believe that he's sincere to you? You don't even need to show me any expression. Why? Why has everything changed since we got married?" Yi Ying asked in a daze. Well, Yi Li felt that she was suddenly possessed by the Virgin Mary and wanted to comfort Yi Ying. Isn't there a saying? Marriage is the grave of love. Since you're already lying in the grave, don't think about the past. The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate. Love? Don't be silly. That's something beyond the grave. Yi Ying was stunned by her sudden strange words. She lowered her eyes and muttered in a daze, "Grave. I really shouldn't have gotten married." Yi Li only wanted to slap her own mouth. She continued to talk nonsense without changing her expression, "Of course not. Men should get married when they're of age and women should get married when they're of age. Even if you don't go to this grave, you have to go to other graves. At least this one looks better, doesn't it? You see, these young ladies and young masters are all deeply affectionate before they get married. But have you read any novels about what happens after those scholars and beauties get married?" Yi Ying was stunned and shook her head. Yi Li said with a straight face, "That's right. Before marriage, both parties are in love with each other and have special feelings for each other. After marriage, there will be daily necessities. Don't be sad. At least 99% of the people in the capital live like this. No one will laugh at you." Yi Ying stared at Yi Li strangely, as if she never knew her. After a long time, she said unwillingly, "Why aren't you like this? There are only you and Prince Ding in the Ding Palace. Oh, young lady, are you envious of me?" Yi Li waved her hand and said, "Our situation is different. You see, if I ask you to marry our prince, you definitely won't agree, right? I guess most people won't agree. This way. Won't Prince be mine alone? Is it like this?" Yi Ying lowered her head and pondered. Yi Li was not interested in knowing what she was thinking about. She still remembered that she didn't really come to chat with Yi Ying and give her psychological counseling. Seeing Yi Ying lost in thought, Yi Li casually asked, speaking of which. I really didn't think that you would like Princely. I thought you would like a cultured and elegant young master. Yi Ying regained her senses and her face turned red. Biting her lips, she stared at her and said, "Are you here to blame me for stealing Princely or are you here to laugh at me?" "Don't, I'm here to thank you." Yi Li held her hand and acted like she was deeply in love. "Although we are not born from the same mother, we are still sisters, aren't we? Did fourth sister really think that I would fall out with you because of a man? In the past, I was only angry that you didn't tell me the truth. Although we weren't born well since young, when have I ever snatched the things you like from you? If you had told me properly at that time, we would have settled the engagement in private and wouldn't have caused such a commotion and made everyone lose face." Yi Ying looked suspiciously at the sincere Yi Li in front of her. Thinking back, she had indeed taken many things from Yi Li since young, but Yi Li never said anything. It was just that at that time, she couldn't wait for Yi Li's engagement to be known by everyone so that she would lose face. Who would have thought that in the end, she would be the one to lose face? Thinking of this, even Yi Ying's prideful heart couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable, but she would never admit it. Yi Li didn't look at her expression and sighed regretfully, "Speaking of which, I always thought that fourth sister would be matched with the capital's #1 scholar or something in the future, a perfect match." "Really, the world makes fools of people." Yi Ying blushed. Of course, she had also fantasized about what her ideal husband would look like. She had also fantasized about a handsome man in white gently holding her hand and gazing at her with deep affection. However, later on, she met Princely. His identity as a prince and the joy of trampling Yi Li under his feet made her gradually forget her dreams. When she truly fell in love with Princely, she felt that it was just her childish thoughts when she was young. But now, the ideal husband that she truly loved treated her like this. If it was someone else, they definitely wouldn't treat me like this. Yi Ying had some vague thoughts in her heart. You really don't hate me?" Yi Ying looked at her hesitantly. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "You said it last time, wasn't that father's idea? Maybe father thinks that I'm not suitable for Princely. But now it seems that father was right, Princely and I are indeed not suitable. I'm very satisfied with my current life, and Prince Ding is also very good." Looking at Yi Li's gentle and tolerant smile, the hesitation in Yi Ying's eyes gradually disappeared. She bit the corner of her lips with some grievance and said, "Father didn't let me marry Princely because he knew that Princely would be like this, right? Mother always said that father and grandmother value you the most. Father must think that Princely isn't good, so he wants me to replace you." Yi Li looked at the sky. "That's your mother wanting you to hate me, okay? How come I don't see that the two at home value me?" Looking at Yi Ying, Yi Li felt some pity for Minister Yi. This was the precious daughter that he doted on and spoiled in the palm of his hand. Chapter 119. Who doesn't know that father dotes on you the most? Probably everyone makes mistakes. Do you still remember what father told you at that time? Yi Ying lowered her head and said softly, "Father. Father said that Zhaoyi Jiejie and I are sisters, so Zhaoyi Jiejie naturally dotes on me more. If I marry Princely, I can also help Zhaoyi Jiejie a little. With Zhaoyi Jiejie around, no one dares to bully me. And if I don't marry Princely, I can only marry the son of an official in the court. If that was the case, if Yi Li married Princely, wouldn't she always be inferior to her?" Yi Li nodded. If it wasn't for Prince Ding and her situation at that time, the emperor would never let the two daughters of the minister's manor marry the prince of the imperial family. But, just like that, Yi Li felt that something was wrong. Did her father really instigate his younger daughter to steal his elder daughter's fiancé just because he was too biased? It didn't make sense no matter how she thought about it. There must be something she didn't know. But looking at Yi Ying's appearance, she probably didn't know the truth. After so long, Yi Li had already understood a fact. Yi Ying looked arrogant and prideful, and her personality was really selfish. But if she was serious, her lethality was probably not as big as Yi Shan and Yi Lin. She was spoiled too much by Wang Shi, so she didn't learn her lesson. Even if old Madame Yi caught her and taught her a few lessons, she returned to her old ways after a few days. Thinking that she couldn't get any useful information from Yi Ying, Yi Li was ready to get up and leave, but she was pulled by Yi Ying. What should I do? Am I not your mother? Yi Li endured. You are Prince Li's wife. Even Princess Lingyun can't surpass your status. As long as you hold on to Mo Jingli's heart and don't let the virtuous old concubine hate you, life won't be so difficult. Yi Ying glared at her with dissatisfaction. She didn't want life to be difficult, she wanted to live a comfortable life. Yi Li helplessly took a deep breath and said, for example, right now, you need to accompany old imperial concubine to receive the guests and let others know that you are the legitimate Di Fei of the Li Palace. Do you understand? If you have any questions, go back and ask grandmother. You don't think that I, who just got married and don't have any in-laws to serve, know more than grandmother, do you? Yi Li didn't feel guilty at all. Anyway, Madame Dowager would be happy to give her advice. But if you are unhappy, you can write to me. If there's anything you don't understand, I can help you secretly. After all, we are sisters, aren't we? So, if there's anything going on in the Yi family or the Li Palace, you must tell me secretly. After coaxing Yi Ying away, Yi Li let out a long sigh of relief. After chatting with Yi Ying for so long, she didn't get anything out of her. Young Master Feng San, come out if you've heard enough. Yi Li said lightly as she glanced at the treetops on the side. Ha! The luxuriant treetops were pushed aside, revealing a gorgeous red robe. Princess Ding, we meet again. It's a pleasure to meet you. But, how did Princess Consort know it was this one? Yi Li glanced at him with a wooden expression. If young Master Feng San doesn't dress so brightly and dazzlingly, and makes himself so fragrant. Fragrant? Feng Zhiyao raised the corner of his eye and raised his sleeve to smell. How could Suha Zhai's newest and most elegant magnolia fragrance be so fragrant? Wasn't it because he couldn't smell it when he got close? He, Feng San, was a distinguished young master with good taste, not a vulgar idiot who wanted to pour all the fragrant powder on himself. Looking at Feng Zhiyao's stiff and unsightly face, Yi Li lowered her eyebrows and smiled faintly. Feng Zhiyao inspected his appearance and found that there was nothing that damaged his image as an elegant young master. Then, he attributed his exposure to Yi Li accidentally seeing the corner of his robe. With an intoxicated and narcissistic smile, he said, I didn't expect Princess Consort to be so concerned about this one. You could guess this one's identity just by seeing a small corner of my robe. It's really an honor. Young Master Feng San. Yi Li raised her head and smiled. Didn't anyone teach you that you shouldn't play with your friend's wife? Or, should I pass on your words to the prince? Also, the reason why I'm sure it's young Master Feng San is because in the entire capital, other than the bridegroom, no other man would dress so coquettishly. Ga, Feng Zhiyao's smile suddenly froze on his face and he almost fell from the tree. He helplessly shrugged and rubbed his stiff face, saying, all right, Feng San knows his mistake. Please forgive me, Princess Consort. Yi Li nodded with tolerance. Feng Zhiyao turned his face to the side, his handsome face twisting. He finally knew why Mo Xiuyao would marry Yi Li. They were like family. He had never seen a woman who could pretend better than Yi Li. Of course, he had never seen a man who could change his face better than Mo Xiuyao. Speaking of which, Princess Consort's analysis just now was really brilliant. Marriage is the grave of love. NN. Thinking of what he had just heard, Feng Zhiyao became proud again. Did Yao know what his dear Princess Consort was thinking? Yi Li didn't have a guilty conscience at all. She nodded seriously and said, young Master Feng San, you have to believe this consort. This is definitely a warning that has been tempered thousands of times. I believe that young Master Feng San agrees with this consort's words. Otherwise, how could a young master still be unmarried at such an old age? Nonsense. This young master and Mo Xiaoyao were the same age, all right? Rubbing his nose, Feng Zhiyao said with a bitter smile, I want to go to the grave, but it's a pity that she doesn't like me. A faint sadness flashed across his handsome face. Yili didn't know how to comfort someone who had a one-sided crush on her. She could only say, there are plenty of fish in the sea. Feng Zhiyao smiled bitterly as he cupped his hands to express his thanks for comforting her. Yili didn't want to disturb his sadness and said, then I won't disturb young master any longer. Goodbye. AI. Feng Zhiyao looked at the woman who turned to leave without any hesitation. He said in a daze, your prince wanted me to come see you. He wants you to be careful. Many thanks. Be careful. Yili pondered as she slowly walked away. Feng Zhiyao angrily put the tree branch back to hide his figure. He grumbled, what kind of person is this young master becoming? You even have to order me around for such a small matter. Are you worried that you won't come see for yourself? Mo Xiaoyao, the reward you give better be worthy of this young master's contributions, otherwise. Just as she returned to the garden, Hua Tianxiang pulled Qin Zheng and Murong Ting over happily. Yili, are you all right? Qin Zheng pulled on Yili and asked with concern. Hua Tianxiang smiled and said, Zheng, I already told you not to worry. How can this fellow not be all right? Who in the capital doesn't know of Princess Ding's illustrious reputation? She can make the Xiling princess squat on the ground and cry just by scaring her. Li, good job. Murong Ting patted Yili's shoulder and praised loudly. She was also very regretful, it's a pity that this young lady didn't see what happened that day. Li, let's compete in archery when we have time. Yili waved her hand and said with a smile, no need, I'm just scaring a little girl. I don't dare to compete in swordsmanship with General Murong's beloved daughter. Wouldn't that be showing off in front of an expert? Murong Ting didn't buy it, this young lady doesn't believe it. In short, we must compete. Chapter 120. Alright, Ting, can you say something else? Do you want to be chased and beaten by General Murong again? Qin Zheng said with a headache. Murong Ting snorted discontentedly, Zheng, you only know how to use my father to scare me. Yili looked curiously at Qin Zheng and Hua Tianxiang. Unfortunately, the two of them kept silent under Murong Ting's threatening gaze. Hua Tianxiang gave her a look that said we'll talk about it later. Qin Zheng pulled Yili and smiled, ever since Li, got married, other than Tianxiang, we haven't seen Li, Yili smiled apologetically, recently, there were some small matters in the Fu, so I didn't go out. In a few days, can you come to the Ding King Fu to play? The four of them found a place with fewer people and sat down. Qin Zheng and the other two asked about Yili's newlywed life with concern. Yili didn't want her friends to worry and picked out some fun and happy things to talk about. Hua Tianxiang said enviously, Li is still the happiest. Those people who are afraid of marrying into the Ding King Fu can't think straight. Look at how comfortable Li's life is now. The moment she enters the door, she is the mistress of the household. She is simple and has less scheming. Prince Ding doesn't even have a concubine to sleep with. Murong Ting nodded in agreement, Tianxiang is right. Prince Ding is indeed a good person. This person worshipped the Ding King Fu without any principles. Qin Zheng looked at Yili with a faint worry in her eyes. Yili smiled and held her hand to express that she was fine. Only then did Qin Zheng nod slightly. A few friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time were chatting happily. Yili also temporarily threw those annoying questions to the back of her mind and chatted with her three friends. Suddenly, a sharp scream came from somewhere. Murong Ting jumped up from the stool and looked around vigilantly to find the source of the sound. Yili frowned and pointed in a direction. It seems to be coming from there. The four of them looked at each other. That seemed to be the resting place of the womenfolk. The four of them were not the only ones who heard the scream. At least half of the people in the garden heard it. At this time, many people were curiously walking over. Murong Ting whispered, "This time, the bride and groom are fine. What about the guests? The Li Prince Mansion's wedding must have been disliked by the heavens, right?" Qin Zheng covered her mouth and glared at her fiercely. "Can you talk nonsense about this kind of thing?" "Let's go and have a look," Hua Tianxiang said, raising her eyebrows. It would be a waste not to watch the liveliness in the Li Palace. There was an exquisite little courtyard that was connected to the front yard. The Li Palace had arranged for the womenfolk to rest here. There was only one entrance to the completely independent courtyard that led to the garden. This prevented the guests in the front courtyard from accidentally bumping into the womenfolk, and also prevented the guests from disturbing the womenfolk living in the manor. By the time Yili's group of four reached the entrance of the courtyard, many people had already entered. Yili stood at the entrance and looked around. Hua Tianxiang asked in a low voice, "Li, what's wrong?" Yili shook her head and whispered with a smile, "I don't know what happened. That woman who screamed just now was really loud. In this kind of courtyard, if it was in the room, it was impossible for half of the garden to hear it. Therefore, the biggest possibility was that someone deliberately stood in the courtyard and screamed to attract people over. Let's go to the back. There's no need to rush to watch the liveliness," Yili whispered. Hua Tianxiang looked at her in confusion. Although she did not know why she said this, she did not object. Instead, he and Qin Zheng grabbed Murong Ting, who wanted to rush forward, from the left and the right. Heavens, how could this be? As soon as they stepped into the reception pavilion, they saw two girls come out in a panic with red faces. One of them said, "Quickly send someone to invite the virtuous consort." The four of them looked at each other. Something really happened. Murong Ting said, "Zheng, you wait outside. I'll go in and take a look first." Yili grabbed her and said calmly, "Murong, you accompany Zheng, and Tianxiang. I'll go in and take a look." Seeing the two girls' faces as red as apples, Yili could almost guess what had happened inside. No matter what, she was a close person. If Murong Ting, an unmarried daughter, saw something she should not see, then it would not be good. Qin Zheng and Hua Tianxiang were also clever. They understood Yili's meaning after thinking about it. Hua Tianxiang said, "Why don't we wait?" There was no hurry to watch the liveliness. Yili shook her head. "I'll go and take a look first." She was most worried that Yi Ying, that idiot, did something she should not have done. And as Li Wangfei's sister, it was not right for her to stand by and do nothing at this time. "Don't worry, you wait here. The virtuous consort should be here soon." Turning inside, there were many people standing at the door of one of the rooms. They all stood at the door with strange expressions, not knowing whether to enter or leave. Yili swept a glance. Most of them were young women, and there were a few young daughters-in-law. Those of high status were accompanied by the virtuous consort to talk. Those who could manage the household and were steady found a place to gather and talk. At this moment, most of the people playing outside were young girls and young women. Seeing Yili walk in, someone finally recovered. "Ding, greetings to Princess Ding." A woman dressed as a young woman saw Yili and hurriedly bowed. Although she tried to be elegant, she could not hide the embarrassment on her face. "Greetings to Princess Ding." Everyone hurriedly bowed. Yili looked at everyone who had different expressions on their faces. Then, she heard a series of moans and gasps coming from the half-closed door. Speechless, she went forward and closed the half-closed door under everyone's shocked gazes. She calmly said, "Let's go out first. The virtuous consort and Li Wangfei should be here soon." Everyone blushed in shame. It was not that they did not understand the principle of not listening to indecent things, but they were dumbfounded by this strange situation. Everyone could not quietly come and quietly leave as if nothing had happened, right? Wang Fei is right. Let's go quickly, a woman said. The others agreed. Unfortunately, there was someone who didn't want to let this matter go smoothly. A servant girl appeared out of nowhere and rushed over while crying. Princess. Princess is inside. Clang. The door that had been closed was pushed open by the Yahuan. The scene inside was unobstructed. The women present were petrified. Princess. Heavens, what had happened to them? Yili calmly looked at her left hand that had missed and silently took it back. All right, she was being nosy. But that damned Yahuan dared to touch her. So what if she knew martial arts? Ah! Hearing it was one thing, but seeing it was another. The young misses that finally recovered from their shock couldn't help but scream. Instantly, ear-piercing screams filled the room. Yili helplessly wanted to rub her ears. Pitiful little girls, go back and drink a few thousand calming tea. Fortunately, even though the people inside were very focused, they were still able to notice such a large commotion when the door was pushed open and a person rushed in. So the moment the door was pushed open, the people inside quickly grabbed the blankets and tightly wrapped the two people inside. Actually, it was fine. There was still a veil screen in front of the window. Yili silently thought, "You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.